Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to French Dip Empire. I am the Empress, and I am here to talk about scandals and socialites, billionaires, royalty, and quite frankly, anything else that catches my eye. And today's discussion, we're continuing with a multi-part stream on the Menendez brothers' coverage by writer Dominick Dunne in Vanity Fair magazine. We started with yesterday's stream. Movie of the Week's in the chat says, "Hi again, I can hear you." Good, I'm glad you can hear me. I can't hear you, but I can certainly see you talking in the chat. So as I was saying, we're picking up where we left off with yesterday's stream, rather a long stream that happened to coincide inadvertently with the Los Angeles District Attorney's press conference. George Gascon, the DA out in LA, made his press conference discussing how he's going to ask for a resentencing of Lyle and Erik Menendez. And I actually had no idea that that press conference was scheduled for the day I decided to go ahead and delve into the Vanity Fair archives to look up Dominick Dunne's coverage. And this is certainly traveling back in time. The first article, yesterday's article, was from 1990 after the two had been arrested and charged, but the trial had not yet officially started. And I'm going to go over here and bring up, this is today's article, Dominick Dunne's Courtroom Notebook, the Menendez murder trial. And if you're not familiar with Dominick Dunne, I covered this a little bit yesterday, but I'll just recap it in case you are new. This was Dominick Dunne, and he died a while ago, but if you are familiar with him at all, you're probably familiar with his television show. You can see here Dominick Dunne's Power, Privilege, and Justice. Can't remember what cable channel that was on, but I'm pretty sure it was a cable, not regular broadcast TV. And he covered topics that he would also cover as a columnist in Vanity Fair magazine. And so this was yesterday's article, his first article on the topic, which was Nightmare on Elm Drive. This says September 2017 because I guess that's when Vanity Fair uploaded it to their site. But as you can see up here, it is actually from the October 1990 issue. And this was the article we were reading as Gascon made his press conference, in which he said, as far as I know, nothing really that new, just that he was asking for them to basically allow them to be released on, I think it was 50 years probation, that they would, be free with time served. And it was my understanding that this would be decided on by a judge, that it would not be the DA's decision. Although I did see a lot of headlines that seemed to indicate that people thought that this was a done deal and that this was their release was imminent, which it may very well be, but I suppose it's not on the decision of the DA, but on a judge. And I guess that will happen sometime in the future. Anyway, I personally am less concerned about what actually happens with their case in 2024 or 2025, whenever the decision, I guess it probably won't come down before the end of this year, but as I'm recording this, it's October 2024, because you may be listening to it at some time in the future if you are listening to the recording and not this live stream. But I am more interested in the coverage at the time, and I am a big Dominick Dunne fan, read his novels, read his column back when he was still alive and kicking and writing for Vanity Fair. And I have I've not been watching much, if any, of the coverage of the Menendez brothers now, and I haven't been watching the Ryan Murphy show Monsters, which is dramatizing, obviously, that topic. But I wanted to see how it was reported at the time, like in the moment. If I was living in the moment, which of course I did at the time, but not with knowing what was going to happen in the future. Not that psychic. Might be a touch psychic, but not that psychic. So it's interesting to revisit what were the rumors at the time, what was the speculation, and this isn't crazy. Vanity Fair is kind of tabloidy, but it's still mainstream media. It's a legit publication, and Dominick Dunne's writing was not anything because he was known for being gossipy and including rumor as well as fact in his writing. It was always a good dishy read, but it wasn't anything. He was always obviously careful not to write anything that was going to get either he or his publication or the publishers sued. Condé Nast, the publishers of Vanity Fair. So there's always a lot of good dirt, but there's often a little bit of cloaking. They knew what they could get away with. So they always make for good reads. Now, today's article is from October 1993, so exactly 3 years ago, and that's what it starts off saying. It says 3 years ago. This is the article that we're going to be reading today, and the trial had already started, I guess, at that point, or was about to start. And before we get into that, and I see Movie of the Week says in the chat, think it was on A&E or whatever City Confidential was on. You mean Dominick Dunne's show. I think you might be right. It might have been A&E. If it wasn't, it might have been Court TV, or was there a precursor to Court TV? Or it might have been on, there was another channel, but I forget. It has been so long since I've actually had cable television in my home that I cannot, in my palace, that I cannot recall what channel it was on. I did see some of it, but I think I had kind of stopped watching cable television by the time Dominick Dunne's show was on. So I do remember seeing it, but I don't remember it that well. I much more remember reading his articles in Vanity Fair and, of course, his novels, and then watching a couple of his novels were turned into TV movies and or miniseries. So I remember watching those, 2 or 3 of those back in the day. But anyway, before we get into this second article, I wanted to give some updates on people that were mentioned in yesterday's article. And okay, so let me go back to the 1990 article, Nightmare on Elm Drive. And Dominick Dunne, in his introduction to the Menendez brothers case, mentioned, as you can see early on in yesterday's article, he talks about how the and I guess before I get into this, even though you can see some of this on the screen, obviously this topic, it's the Menendez brothers. There's going to be some, things that are not appropriate for either children or sensitive ears. So if that's the kind, if the topic of, people doing things that are very, very not nice is a problem, and there will be details. Obviously, I will try to talk around any of YouTube's problematic language that is problematic for YouTube, but nonetheless, it's going to be, the words will appear on the screen in the articles. I will try to talk around them. But if you're sensitive, maybe don't listen to this one. But if you're already here because it says Menendez brothers, I'm assuming you're not that sensitive. So I think you can handle it. And I know Movie of the Week can. And in the chat, Movie of the Week says, Power and Privilege and Justice. Yeah, it was Court TV. Well, there you go, Court TV. Okay, so in the 1990 article, Dominick Dunne mentions these other well-publicized crimes by children against their parents. And the first one he mentioned was in 1983, 20-year-old Michael Miller, the son of President Ronald Reagan's personal lawyer, Roy Miller, did a very, very bad thing, more than one bad thing, to his mother. and he went through a trial, and the similarities are brought up because not only did he attack and end his own mother, but that it was that maybe there were some issues there that would allow him to not have to serve a normal term in a prison the way that say a random person or any other person who might have done the same crimes would receive. And in this case, the judge accepted that Michael Miller was schizophrenic, and he was committed to a mental hospital. And I wondered what ever happened with Michael Miller. Well, apparently he is, let's see, I want to make sure I have the right, this one. Okay, so a book was published on the case. I'm not going to read this entire article. It's from 1994. And if you're curious, go look up the book, In the Best of Families, which is a 90s book about the 1983 crime. And, oh, go away, pop-up. What ended up happening, apparently Michael Miller is still in a hospital, and that's it. He's still in the hospital. It seems as though his father had held out hope that he would at some point be released, even though this was the guy who did the sort of Oedipus type activity with his mother, but they couldn't determine if that action of violation had occurred before or after his other crime, which ended her existence. If you catch my drift, it said it, here, I'll go back to the article. It says it right here. There you go. I'm not saying it. So anyway, as far as I can tell, he is still in a hospital, Patent State Hospital in California. And his, it's a bit of a hyperbolic headline from Salon.com, but I found another mention of the Miller case. Here it is. Yes, two sons of Roy Miller. Both developed schizophrenia. One self-deleted in 1981. The other did the thing with the mother in 1983. So, not mentioned in the Dominick Dunne article or the other article was that Roy Miller's sons both apparently had some issues. And Roy, this being a very old photo apparently of the attorney, no longer with us. Seems like he departed in 2007. This was the wife. You can see 1983. And this would have been the older son who self-deleted. And the other son, the one that was convicted of this 1983 crime with the mother, is not listed. So either he is still with us and probably still in the hospital, or he is it's sometime more recently deceased and it has not been updated. But I assume he's could very well still be alive, since if this is the older brother born in 1957, a good chance that Michael could still be alive and in the hospital. In the chat, Movie of the Week says, Oedipus type activity, truly you have a facility with euphemisms. Well, YouTube certainly makes it such that one has to speak around a lot of things. And in listening to other YouTubers talk about sensitive topics, it is certainly one thing where I have become very sensitive to which words, phrases, topics, and concepts are are problematic for YouTube, not necessarily for the audience, but sometimes. And so I'm doing my best, although it does make me feel like I'm speaking gobbledygook and being pointlessly obscure. I would prefer to just say what the words are, but this is how it goes. So we're working with YouTube, working with them. So that was Michael Miller, that one case that was mentioned. The second one, I don't think there was there much to say about this one. It was Ricky Kyle, who was the 20-year-old from Bel Air, who also in 1983 deleted his father, Henry Harrison Kyle, a television movie production millionaire. And this was one where the mother did not want the son to go to prison. And similarly, in the as with the Menendez brothers, it was argued, and for their defense argued that they were abused, and that is why they committed their crimes. In the Kyle case, it was argued the same, that he was not, just bloodthirsty or greedy, which was also the accusation against the Menendez brothers, but that that Kyle, the son, may have wanted the father's money. Defense argued no, it was abuse. The mother supported the son, and yeah, it didn't. Here, I was trying to figure out what I lost my place. Didn't it say he got 5 years? He got 5 years, Ricky Kyle did, for his father's deletion. And I don't have a link for that, because that was all that was. There is a book, I forget the title, that was written about this case as well. But as far as I can tell, he served his 5 years, and then that's it, moved on with life. The other, another case that was mentioned, the Woodman brothers, Stuart and Neil, accused of hiring two assassins to delete their parents in Brentwood, which was, wasn't that Nicole Brown Simpson's? Was that her neighborhood? I remember the OJ case. It was Brentwood, and what was the other one? Gretna Green, or was that the street name? I remember Brentwood came up constantly in the OJ trial. Well, anyway, so that was that neighborhood. So what happened with Stuart and Neil Woodman, that was an easy one. They have a Wikipedia page for their crime, and everyone was convicted, and at least half of the men who were convicted are no longer with us. As you can see, Stuart convicted in 1990, and supposedly he passed away in prison in 2014. The other brother also convicted. Presumably he's still alive and in prison. And then the two men that they hired to actually do the deed, sentenced to prison, and one also left reality in 2014. What a coincidence. One of the Woodmans left in October of 2014, and one of their hired hitmen, if that's an okay, I don't even know if that term is allowable, is okay with YouTube. But anyway, one of them also died in November of 2014. So look at that. So that's what happened with the Woodman. Movie of the week in the chat says, yes, Nicole lived in Brentwood. Okay, I guess that's where she and Ron Goldman met their unfortunate, untimely ends. And then right. So then the last similar crime that Dominick Dunne brought up was the one of Oscar Salvatierra, who was taken out in a very interesting premeditated situation by his son. And this the result, and the interesting thing about that was that the son's defense attorney was Leslie Abramson, who was the defense attorney for I always forget which one it was. Erik, right? Not Lyle. I think it was Erik, yeah. And she also used a defense abuse excuse for the defense, or an abuse defense excuse. And in this case, the son who took out his father was convicted, but sentenced to nothing but probation. Basically walked free. And whatever happened to that guy? Well, apparently he's just free. The name is not unique. His name is not unique, and there are other people with his name, the same name, who are not convicted of doing what he did to his father. So that must be a little awkward. And as a matter of fact, I found a blog post of a man who has the same name or first and last name, who is not a criminal and has been mistaken for that man, and has been, I guess, a little awkward in his life, but he seems to be doing okay anyway. And then the last update is on Judalon Smith and Dr. Jerome Oziel. Jerome Oziel was the Menendez brothers' therapist / shrink. I thought he was mostly for Erik, but seemed to be involved with both of them, both of the brothers. And his mistress / girlfriend, Judalon Smith, was involved with supposedly eavesdropping on the Menendez brothers, supposedly knew that they had confessed to the crimes, knew of the existence of tapes which implicated the brothers in the crimes. And there was kind of a weird, entertaining little side quest, if you will, in discussing Judalon Smith, who Dominick Dunne made a very prominent part of that first article, which we read in yesterday's stream. So I looked up whatever happened to those two charmers who were seemed really made for each other in a very unpleasant way. Like, you say people are made for each other in a good way. These two were kind of made for each other in a bad way. And so what happened to Judalon Smith, this is Judalon Smith, the real one, back in the 90s. This, of course, is from Monsters. That's just an actress. And it says at the bottom of this article that what happened to Judalon Smith, she basically lives a private life. Her personal LinkedIn page says she's a trained and NREMT certified EMT. So basically, a paramedic. However, she hasn't updated her profile since 2012. And this is an article from 2024 because it's talking about monsters. So that's about as updated, September 2024. That's about as updated as we can get. And what happened to her paramour, Dr. Oziel, pardon my scrolling, there is a link on this page. Here it is. And again, where is he? Okay, that's from the TV show. That's not the real guy. They have a picture of the real Dr. Jerry. Yeah, there he is. That's Dr. Jerry. And Dr. Jerry is not a therapist. And he was... In 1997, he was stripped of his psychology license after being accused by a state panel of breaking confidentiality rules and engaging in inappropriate relationships with his female patients, according to the Los Angeles Times. And if you were here for the first stream yesterday when we read Dominick Dunne's 1990 article, you would not be surprised in the least that he was accused of these things. Because he did not seem to be a very ethical or moral individual. So what does Dr. Jerry, or no longer, I guess, Dr. Jerry, well, if he has a PhD, he's still allowed to call himself a doctor. Dr. Jerry, as of 2024, is working at the Marital Meditation Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he now lives. He works with couples to improve their relationships through mediation. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it said meditation. Mediation. I guess either could work. As an alternative to getting divorced. I kind of like my idea better, that you go and you just meditate as a way. Like, we're not going to fight, and we're not going to discuss our issues. Let's just chill. We'll meditate, and then we'll just move on. We'll be mellow and happy. And what were we fighting about? I don't know, honey. What was it? I don't know. I'm too chill. I'm all ohmed out. Well, anyway, I think it's kind of funny that Dr. Oziel is working in marital mediation, considering this was the guy who picked up Judalon Smith when he was in the process, allegedly, of divorcing his wife, who was his partner in his therapy. Like, they were both therapists, and they shared office space, and they had a home and 2 children together, which they also shared, and they continued to live together in the marital home while he was cheating/dating Judalon Smith. And he also continued to share office space with his wife while he was with Judalon Smith. And at one point, according to the first article, he moved Judalon Smith into his marital home with his wife and his 2 daughters. I suppose he can mediate a marriage. Who knows? Maybe they're even still married. That I didn't look up. But when I take my first break, I think I'm going to look up whatever happened to the wife. Where is she now? Maybe they're still together. I really don't know. I forgot to look her up, but I'll check that out when I take a break in just a little while. But that is all for our updates. The whatever happened to the people, some of the people from the first article. And now we should probably move forward and get into the main event. This is the second article from October 1993, Dominick Dunne's courtroom notebook, the Menendez murder trial. And it starts off. As the prosecution rests, the author reports on one of the year's ugliest and most discussed trials. Lyle and Erik Menendez stand accused of the cold-blooded murder of their parents, a crime Dunne investigated for Vanity Fair in 1990. Yes, that's yesterday's stream. And if you want to hear that article, go ahead and check out yesterday's stream. Maybe not now, but check it out and you can hear the text of that article too. And though the brothers have confessed, they are fighting back with a shocking charge that their Hollywood executive father essayed them. You can read it right here. I can't say it on YouTube. Sorry. So, scrolling down, that's Dominick Dunne, as you can see, who's no longer with us. Leslie Abramson, the Menendez brothers, and I don't recognize that woman, and I cannot read the caption. Probably another attorney. So, here we go. 3 years ago, shortly after Lyle and Erik Menendez were arrested in Los Angeles for the murder of their parents, I wrote about the case in Vanity Fair. I had followed the story from the day of the murders, and I had not really been shocked to read 7 months later that the sons had been arrested. Despite a lot of talk that it had been a mafia hit, people who know about such things had told me that the mob would never have done such a messy job. Okay, now, messy job. Based on the information in the first article, it was messy in the sense that there was a shotgun used multiple times on 2 human beings. That's very messy. However, what Dominick Dunne mentioned was that the crime scene was actually fairly clean despite that, in the sense that there were no, say, fingerprints, handprints, footprints that would show exactly where the assailants had gone. There was no indication of cleaning up of cleaning up of the assailant's body, of clothing that was soiled by the remnants of the crime, if you catch my drift. I'm trying to be a little careful. And the most particular of the aspects of, say, cleaning the scene, where on the one hand it would have been obviously messy with the bodies, but not messy in this sense. He mentioned that the shell casings were removed from the scene, and that was a particularly, and the issue that they never found the weapon. So it was actually not that messy in that sense, but messy in the other sense, the human sense. In the chat, Movie of the Week says, but they were saying in the other article that it was super careful and professional. See, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It was messy in one sense, but was it a messy job? I mean, it actually seems fairly clean in the sense that they weren't caught on any surveillance footage. Not that, I mean, at that time it was less. People had less surveillance cameras, but this was in Beverly Hills with people who have a lot of money and people who have fame, and they would have had more security than the average, nowadays anybody can have security cameras all over their property. But back then it would have been less so. But there in Beverly Hills, yeah, there should have been something, I would imagine. Anyway, back to the article. Okay, one shot. Oh boy, I hope YouTube doesn't have a problem with this language. To the back of Hollywood executive Jose Menendez's head would have been sufficient. And then out the door. No hitman would have been so fastidious, oh here we go, as to stop and pick up the shell casings. And the mafia would never have killed the wife. Jose Menendez had said, okay, does anyone remember the scene from Goodfellas after they do the Lufthansa heist and they're saying keep it quiet and people are spending money and being flashy? Wasn't it Maurice Toupe's? Wasn't it he and I thought it was the wife, the blonde, they're in the car because they weren't being careful about not flashing their money around? Movie of the week, I know you've seen Goodfellas. Was it indeed the wife? Because they were both in the car and they were both deleted because they weren't careful. And also, well, there are different kinds of organizations that might not be so fastidious or respectful of wives, but okay. Anyway, Jose Menendez had 6 wounds inflicted by a 12-gauge shotgun, and Kitty Menendez had 10. The ironically named family room where the massacre took place as the couple sat watching television and eating bowls of vanilla ice cream and strawberries was covered with, I hope I can say this, YouTube don't hurt me, blood, guts, body pieces, and what they call matter. Yes. Movie of the week says in the chat, yep, they bought the white rolls or something. Oh, yeah, the car, right, in Goodfellas. They bought the car, and she had, I think, a fur coat, and maybe they had jewelry, watches, something like that, right? But the wife, girlfriend, whatever she was taken out, too. I don't remember if it was Maury, but it was one of them. Okay, back to the article. The thought that it might have been the sons first occurred to me when I saw television coverage of the memorial service for Jose and Kitty Menendez at the Directors Guild on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. That location was the idea of the famed publicist Warren Cowan, who had been hired by Live Entertainment, Jose Menendez's company, to dispel whispers that he had had mafia connections, and to make him look like an accepted member of the film community. There was a second memorial service a few days later in Princeton, New Jersey, where the family had once lived. Lyle and Erik spoke very movingly. Lyle read a letter his father had once written him, filled with love and pride in his son. It was when they were walking outside after the first service, receiving condolences, that the thought came to me. I wonder, I said to myself. In my article, I suggested that at their trial, SM might be introduced by the defense as a way of returning the Menendez brothers to their mansion, their private tennis court, their private swimming pool, their fancy cars, and their fancy chess sets. A friend of the boys, with whom Lyle had played chess until 2 o'clock in the morning the night before his arrest, told me at dinner a short time later, "It's only the tip of the iceberg." Another friend who was present said, "The tapes will show that Jose M'd Lyle at a very young age." And if you're not clear what I'm saying when I say M'd, it's right here on the screen. There you go. I thought that was ridiculous and wondered whether or not I should even mention it, but I did. Friends of the boys and people close to the family called the notion absurd. Also in that article was the only print interview ever given by Judalon Smith. Oh, and thank heaven she did. What a treasure trove of delight that was. Oh, Movie of the Week says in the chat, oh no, the M word, yes. Not marriage. the very, very, very bad M word that isn't the crime that they were convicted, the brothers were convicted of. The other very, very bad M word. Okay, also in that article was the only print interview ever given by Judalon Smith. And as Dominick Dunne pointed out in yesterday's article, it is Smith, not Smythe, even though it's spelled with a Y, whom Diane Sawyer interviewed for television on Primetime Live. Oh, she got Diane Sawyer to interview her. Nice. Smith said that at the time of the murders, she was the mistress of Dr. L. Jerome Oziel, the Beverly Hills psychologist to whom Erik Menendez later confessed. According to Smith, at the behest of Dr. Oziel, a behest he denies, she listened to the confession outside the door of the therapist's inner office. Yes, now she claimed that he had asked her to wait there in his office waiting room and to listen if anything, like, agitated, if there was any agitation, if anything sounded like it was going to go wrong, if he would need help, that she should rush in and, I guess, save him or make a phone call or something. It was also stated in the first article that the walls were so thin in the Oziel therapist's office that you could hear what anyone was saying, or you could hear what the clients were saying in the other office spaces. Because remember, or exam room, I don't know, it's not an exam room, but whatever, the room that you go into to talk to your therapist, he shared this, as I said, with his wife, with whom he was estranged, and they would split up their office hours, according to the first article, so that the voices could not be heard, because otherwise you could hear what other people were saying, which is a weird place to have, a confession to this kind of a crime taking place. So the idea of, say, overhearing it, her merely being in the office could lead her to overhear what was being said, and he would have known that, presumably. So whether he asked her to do it or not is kind of immaterial. She probably would have been able to hear something anyway, and he would have known that, but whatever. Back to the article. Later, after breaking off with the doctor, whom she claimed had played mind games with her and dispensed drugs to her, which he was not licensed to do, not as a psychologist, only a psychiatrist with an MD can do that. And as they pointed out in the, Dunne mentioned in the last article, Oziel is a mere PhD, not allowed to dispense medication. Smith went to the Beverly Hills police and told everything she knew. She provided the police with all the information they needed to arrest the brothers. She knew that the shotguns had been purchased in San Diego. She knew about the false ID that had been used to buy the guns. She knew that Oziel had made tapes of his recollection of Erik's and Lyle's confessions on October 31 and November 2, 1989, as well as a tape of a session with them on December 11. In this odd case, boy, that is putting it mildly, it is very odd. And reading through the first article, weird things kept popping up again and again that made no sense. And I am hoping that these additional articles will clear up the confusion that I had in reading them, but this is already keeping me confused, because it is odd how she would know that this woman became like the linchpin of the case, but whatever, because she feels a little, to make an O.J. Simpson trial or case comparison, a little Cato Kaleny, if you catch my drift, if you're familiar with the case. OJ and familiar with Cato. She feels a little Cato-y, but maybe she's more like Paula Barbieri, if you remember these people from the OJ case. If not, let's get back to the article. Okay, so in this odd case, one of the greatest oddities is that Judalon Smith, who was responsible for getting the boys arrested, is scheduled to be a witness for the defense. Really? Okay, that's weird. As I mentioned in the previous stream, I really didn't follow the Menendez brothers trial when it happened, and I am not super familiar with all of the details of the case. I basically just have the large, the broad brushstrokes that anyone might be. So this is interesting for me to learn. Oh, movie of the week in the chat says Kato and Paula blasts from the past. Yes, indeed. This is what, 30 years ago? More. This is 34? 19. No, this is 1993, this article. So 31 years ago. A long time ago. Okay. And Dr. Oziel, who at first attempted to conceal the incriminating tapes, is the main witness for the prosecution. Okay. After my article appeared in the October 1990 issue, Dr. Oziel hired a public relations firm, and with his wife by his side, oh boy, I really hope they're still married. That would warm my heart in a really weird way. With the wife, held a press conference in the Beverly Hilton Hotel at which he denied all of Smith's allegations and announced that he was suing me and this magazine. And right after I said they know how to be careful in what they say so they don't get sued. It says that he's going to sue them. Okay. And also, isn't it funny that someone who's a witness for the prosecution would feel that they would want to make a press conference talking about what they know or what they would say in trial? I would think that the prosecution would not want him to do that and would maybe work to try to prevent that press conference from happening. But this is just a crazy, crazy story and a crazy case. Everybody's acting weird, in my opinion. But maybe if everyone's acting weird, maybe this is just business as usual. It is LA. Okay, back to the article. In July of this year, the Supreme Court of the state of California ruled that the tapes of the boys' confessions that they had K'd their parents would be admissible as evidence, although the tape of Oziel's session with the brothers would remain inadmissible. Now that's odd. The tape of his session would be inadmissible, but it says the tapes of their confessions, but I thought it said that they did not have actual tapes of them confessing. They had tapes of Oziel claiming he remembered them saying that they were Oziel's tapes that were supposedly his recollections of these sessions in which the confessions took place. Okay, I'm confused. Maybe it will clear up in a moment. Okay, in the chat, movie of the week says, you'd think that they try to avoid stepping on their own feet. Well, you mean with Oziel and the press conference. Yeah, as I said, this is a very confusing case. It's really weird. Okay, where did I leave off? Once that ruling was finally made, the boys could no longer plead innocent. They had confessed and given details, and notes on their confessions were on tape. A little more, well, they can still plead not guilty. You can do whatever you want. I mean, you can plead whatever you want in a courtroom, really. A little more than a week before the start of the trial on July 20, the defense, conceding that the boys had K'd their parents, said it would prove they had K'd their parents in self-defense because they were in fear for their lives after years of psychological, physical, and abuse. Okay. The prosecution is seeking to prove that the brothers K'd out of hatred and greed for the $15 million estate which they stood to inherit. That is a poorly written sentence. It sounds like they did it out of hatred for the money. See what I mean? Pardon me for being being a stickler for English. Okay. Pamela Bozanich, the chief prosecutor, said, "This is not a prosecution trial. This is a defense trial. The defense has conceded all the prosecution charges. They have to prove that the boys were in immense danger from their parents, and they have to prove SM. The state is seeking the death penalty." Okay. Back when I guess California still had it. I don't remember when they changed that, but they did away with their death penalty. Movie of the week in the chat says, I don't think anyone has ever cared for hate of money. I'm sure someone has. I'm sure someone has whipped up their anti-capitalist sentiment, perhaps. Or maybe they were just very angry at someone who had a lot of money. But yeah, I see your point. Okay, back to the article. In Judge Stanley M. Weisberg's courtroom in the Van Nuys Superior Court of the State of California for the County of Los Angeles, it is as if we are participating in a long mini-series. Yes, and it will be. It will be a mini-series in the future, in which Leslie Abramson, the defense attorney for Erik, the younger of the two confessed killers. Oh, I got it right. Oh, and I said the K word. Don't hurt me, YouTube. Don't hurt me. Is defining for all future actresses how the role of the tough lady defense attorney should be played. I remember Leslie Abramson back in the day, and yeah, she was quite an entertaining. I mean, heck, I could see if I got accused of a similar crime that I would be happy to have her be my defense attorney. She certainly goes, or she did. I guess she doesn't practice. She doesn't practice any longer, but she goes all in for her clients. She is 100% in there for them. And yeah, she was very entertaining. Okay, her scene-stealing performance, which at times infuriates Judge Weisberg as it infuriates the prosecution, has all eyes focused on her every moment, and that's exactly where she wants all eyes to be. There is never an instant when she is not performing, and she knows how to play to the court TV camera, as well as Barbra Streisand knows how to play to a movie camera. Wow, this is an old article. He's praising Barbra Streisand's acting. When's the last time Barbra Streisand was in front of a movie camera? I mean, for a movie, too. Not just for, a TV performance or what have you. Movie of the week in the chat says she goes hard. I assume you mean Leslie Abramson and not Barbra Streisand, but I have to say Barbara goes pretty hard, too. If her mic isn't, the color of her microphone isn't matched perfectly, you're going to hear about it. Barbara goes hard, and so does Leslie. Okay, back to the article. Considering the occupation of Jose Menendez and the town where the crimes took place, it is hard not to think of this case and this trial in terms of show business. It is the talk of the town because it's the best show in town. People begin that's a condemnation of Hollywood, that they can't put on a better show than a trial. This is why things like streamers are really taking over. Weird, just random people making their lives the thing that they're performing, and actual television and movies is kind of going down. I think people really want to just see people being weird and don't really care about fake, made up things, like how stand-up is kind of on the decline and people just want to hear people sitting around talking and being funny and feel like they're in a room with friends, as opposed to someone thought of something ahead of time and is consciously putting this thing onto you. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to do this thing. People seem to not really be that into it anymore. They want more natural, organic. Although, is it organic? Some of this is so try hard. But anyway, that's what it kind of feels like. And it does feel like a condemnation of Hollywood. And this was back in 1990 when Hollywood was still super strong. Okay. People begin lining up at 4 a.m. to be sure they get in, the way they do for Academy Awards night. Only 10 members of the media have permanent seats in the courtroom, and I am one of them. You sure are, Dominick. I wouldn't miss this show for $1 million. But in the he probably could make more than $1 million by being there. But in the parlance of the industry, as people out here call the film business, the big guns who have dinner at Morton's on Monday nights, dinner at Spago on Friday nights, dinner at Chasen's or Traders on Sunday nights, and dinner at Orso or Locanda Veneta all the other nights will tell you that this is not big screen material. This is TV fare. Okay, two things. One, OMG, those are some old restaurant references. Very, very old restaurant references. They almost seem dated as of 1993. And the other thing is to deride something as not good enough for the big screen. This is TV fare. Looking at how TV is much more dominant now and how movie stars are pretty happy to be on TV shows that are produced by streaming services and whatnot now is kind of funny. And that the Menendez, it is TV fare. Monsters is on TV. Okay, back to the article. The two defendants, 18 and 21 when they killed their parents, 21 and 25 today, had a sort of glamour at the time of their arrests just over 3 years ago. Again, I don't see it. Now gray prison pallor has replaced their golden tans. The face of Erik, the once great tennis player, who might have been a world-class player, according to the testimony of his former $60,000 a year coach. Wait, I thought it was $50,000 a year in the last article. I guess the price went up in those 3 years. And also, I'd like to say, if he hadn't become a world-class tennis player by the time he was 21... I don't think that was going to happen, what I know of tennis. Also, I'm assuming that you are definitely playing that up if you're charging 50 or 60 grand a year back in the early 1990s to be a tennis coach. I'm sure you're telling your client, oh yeah, sure, you could be world class. You're earning every penny. Okay, so Erik's face has become skeletal, or skeletal as they say in Britain. Their Armani-type clothes have been replaced. Again, Armani type, not actual Armani. It's like how Dunne made that bitchy comment about their second-rate furniture in the Menendez's Beverly Hills home. Oh, it's just so catty. I love it, but it's mean. Their Armani-type clothes have been replaced in the courtroom by sensible shirts, slacks, and sweaters, brought freshly washed and ironed each morning for them to change into from the LA County Jail uniforms they are wearing when they arrive at court. Movie of the Week says in the chat, liars in the industry. What? In Hollywood? In show business? People lie? Never. Never. And I'm telling the truth right now. Back to the article. Their rich boy swaggers, struts, and smirks have been erased. They are now scowling, gloomy, glum. They are, after all, fighting for their lives. They seldom speak to each other. Joan Newcomb, a court spectator who was among the group that arrives each day at 4 a.m, said to me in the corridor one day about Lyle, I have never looked on a face that was so devoid of feeling. It's as if he were dead inside. Well, he did take out his parents. I mean, it's probably gonna, if you don't already have a bit of a dead inside quality, you're probably going to develop one after the fact. Okay, back to the article. Each brother has his own defense team and his own jury. There's a sense of central casting about the people in the courtroom. Lady lawyers abound. What does that even mean? Lady lawyers. Working with Leslie Abramson on Erik's defense is Marsha Morrissey. Jill Lansing, who heads Lyle's team, works with Michael Burt of San Francisco. The prosecutor is Pamela Bozanich, and her partner is Lester Kuriyama, who is Japanese-American. All are young, or reasonably so. All are good-looking. There is not a bum lawyer in the bunch. Although they would pick females because they would pick female defense attorneys to make the brothers seem more sympathetic, and that's what Leslie Abramson would do, how she would always be like picking lint off of Erik's sweater and putting her arm on him and being like mothering to him, that sort of thing, make them seem the boys, calling them boys even though they're legally men, and wearing the pastels. They were always wearing those pastel sweaters to make them look, soft and non-threatening nonsense. I guess it works, but I don't know. It's so obvious it seems silly, and it works like the opposite in my mind, but I don't know. That's me. I'm weird. Okay, back to the article. Although Leslie Abramson dominates the courtroom, each has big scenes to play, and so far they have all played them well. Several of the cross-examinations led by Jill Lansing and Michael Burt have been stunning. Both are quiet, controlled, totally the opposite of Abramson. The Beverly Hills police, who have testified for the prosecution, have all been tall, lean, handsome, with mustaches. Very different from New York cops. New York cops have mustaches. A lot of them have mustaches. What are you talking about? There are tall New York cops. I'm sure there are lean and handsome ones too. I haven't been doing a survey, but very different from New York cops. Not one fatty on the force. Uh-oh, New York, you gonna take that? East Coast gonna represent? Oh, okay, maybe don't represent. It can get a little testy when we get a little East Coast, West Coast in the 90s, right? Okay, the best friend of Erik and the two best friends of Lyle, who have testified, are also tall, lean, and handsome. You know, I don't know that everybody's that handsome, but then again, maybe I just have peculiar standards. Remember Tom Cruise from yesterday? Movie of the Week says in the chat, plenty of cop stashes on the East Coast. Indeed, they're not called cop stashes for no reason. And LA didn't invent police officers, that's for sure. Okay, I'd like to point out, this is one of the people who testified on behalf of the Menendez. I guess he was for Erik. He was Erik's friend. This is Craig, who they said was the Tom Cruise lookalike. Tom Cruise. As I said yesterday, we've got Tom Cruise at home. Tom Cruise at home. I mean, I'm not going to pick on the guy, but I wouldn't say he's Tom Cruise. Not that I think Tom Cruise is all that, but anyway. Dominick Dunne's very impressed with everybody. Okay, not surprisingly, even the bailiffs are blonde, tanned California boys and girls grown up. The computer expert whom Lyle hired shortly after the murders to erase the hard disk on the family computer on which the boys feared there was a will in which they might have been disinherited, and whom Lyle later referred to as some, quote, little Jewish guy, unquote, duly took the stand wearing a yarmulke and said that the whole experience of being in the house on North Elm Drive made my skin crawl. Yeah, I imagine it would. The coroner, who was a tall Peter Lorre type, okay, that is Hollywood casting, but definitely not handsome, showed the grisliest death photographs I have ever seen at a murder trial. Okay, if anyone's... Oh, Movie of the Week. You said it's Cheesehead. Yes, Movie of the Week has nicknamed Craig Cheesehead. I don't agree. He's a tennis instructor. Look, he's on the path to excellence. Not just Cheesehead, but anyway, for anyone who may be younger or just not a movie fan, if you don't know who Peter Lorre is, this was Peter Lorre. You may have seen old cartoons with a character that was meant to look like him and sound like him. He had a very distinctive voice, usually played kind of, well, there you go. There's a fake head of his with Vincent Price. Very appropriate for the spooky season, since we are in October, as we're streaming live right now. But anyway, Peter Lorre, not the most handsome guy, usually playing a bit of a creepy dude in old movies, but a very good actor. Anyway, back to the article. Okay, we left off around Peter Lorre. And then there is Dr. L. Jerome Oziel, the chief witness for the prosecution, the therapist to whom Erik Menendez said, while leaning against a parking meter on Bedford Drive outside the doctor's office, "We did it." Well, we'll get to Dr. Oziel. Well, we've just seen Dr. Oziel. I showed you his picture. This is, that's Jerry. That's Dr. Oziel. Okay. It has been 13 years since I lived in Los Angeles, in Beverly Hills, actually, in the 700 block, not too many streets away from 722 North Elm Drive, the scene of the bloody parricide. Jose Menendez, the deceased father, was chief executive officer of Live Entertainment, a video distribution company that is partially owned subsidiary of Carolco Pictures, a movie production company. He was highly regarded by both his company and parent company. He was, yes, it was mentioned in the first article that he apparently came in and made the company very profitable, like the first year I think he was working for them. So yeah, he would have been very well liked by his superiors. He was also deeply despised by nearly everyone who worked for him. One of his former colleagues told me that at the time of the murder, there was speculation at Live that any one of several executives there had reason to commit them. Jose Menendez loved to humiliate people in meetings in front of their coworkers. He loved to fire people. He loved to threaten to deprive people of their Christmas bonuses a few days before Christmas. What a Scrooge! I mean, words I wish I could use, but I can't. His own bonus the year he was blown away by his sons would have been $850,000 on top of his immense salary. Didn't they say his salary was something like $500,000 a year in the first article? I think it was that, which sounds very low by today's standards, but keep in mind that this was, like over 30 years ago. It would have been worth a lot more money. A lot more money. The Menendez house is almost a metaphor for the family that lived in it. The house is never not described in newspaper accounts as a $4 million mansion. And it was. But don't be fooled by the price. It looked fine from the outside. Inside, it was a disaster, not unlike the Menendez family itself, as fake as the dozens of family photographs of the four of them, smiling and happy together. It did not have the good bad taste to be called vulgar, which would have been acceptable. Of course vulgarity is acceptable in Hollywood. It's almost de rigueur. Movie of the Week writes in the chat, Jose Menendez was a jerk. Well, if you're going to use language like that, Movie of the Week, I might have to kick you out of the chat, but I think I have to agree. I think you're right. A jerk. Yeah, he was a jerk. Okay, where did I leave off? Oh, here we go. Dominick Dunne is going to diss the furniture of dead people. Nice. Is nothing sacred? Okay. It did not have the good bad taste to be called vulgar, which would have been acceptable. It was just tacky, cheaply furnished, looking like a rented house. Oh no, the worst thing in the world, a rental house. Ugh. Shortly after the boys were put in jail, I went through it room by room, flushing toilets, turning on taps, pretending I was a rich guy from New York and a potential buyer. I was in cahoots with a Beverly Hills real estate broker who, at a signal from me, engaged the person representing the family in talking price while I investigated the family room. Okay, this is a little creepy, but I admire his moxie. At the outset, and who isn't recognizing Dominick Dunne? I mean, he is kind of famous. He was famous, and this is Hollywood. He's going surreptitiously to scope out the Menendez house in Beverly Hills, and he's walking down the street, and his neighbors are his old neighbors. Hey, Dom, how's it going? Or I'm sorry, I think he was Nick, not Dom. That's right, Nick Dunne. Anyway, back to the article. At the outset, I must admit to a prejudice. I feel not an ounce of sympathy for these two young Kayers, even though I acknowledge that they lived a miserable life with a pitiful mother and a detestable father. Yes, in the first article, they went over how Kitty was supposedly on booze and pills because Jose was always cheating on her, and he was, just kind of a jerk to the sons as well. Excuse me. Okay, back to the article. I happen to believe in the alternative solution of moving out, but that way, of course, you risk not getting the money. And these kids liked money. In the weeks directly following the brutal killings, before they were suspects, they spent somewhere in the neighborhood of $700,000 on new cars, Rolex watches, clothes, stuff like that. In addition, they left a deposit on a $990,000 penthouse, which they later decided not to buy. To me, they were cold, calculating sociopaths, a word that the defense has been successful in having ruled as inadmissible for the two juries to hear in Oziel's testimony. This was not murder in the heat of passion. This was carefully planned. In addition, their father may or may not have been a child emmerer, depending on whether or not you go along with the defense strategy that was introduced only 10 days before the start of the trial, 3 years after the boys were arrested. Well, actually, the defense strategy, it may have only been introduced 10 days before the start of the trial, but even back in 1990 in Dominick Dunne's own article, he was speculating that this would be a defense strategy used, and he specifically mentioned Leslie Abramson in relation to that. Okay, moving on. Okay. This, after all, was a man, you will hear, who pulled Erik's hair, oh no, when forcing this 11-year-old to... I can't say that on YouTube. I don't even know how you'll have to figure that out. Something you would no one in their right mind would ever even think of a child being in that position, let alone want to put a child in that position. Continuing, who slapped him repeatedly when the child cried after his father did a thing for the first time, and who forcibly did another thing that should not be involved with children. The section that I'm not able to quite read is here, and you can read it yourself, but it involves things of a manner that I just can't say. Movie of the week in the chat says, oh no, yeah, no need to mention that out. Yeah, it's pretty graphic, and so I'll just scroll this away. Business acquaintances of Jose, with whom I spoke, tend to scoff at the stories of him S.A.ing his sons. He was an extremely macho man, known to have had a mistress for 8 years and a string of disposable girlfriends. Okay, number one, your business acquaintances are not necessarily going to know everything you're doing in your private life. Number two, presenting oneself as a, quote, extremely macho man, unquote, does not preclude doing the things that they claim that he may have done. Number three, having a mistress and other girlfriends also does not preclude one doing other things. If you were here for the first article, Dominick Dunne claimed, I think quoted one of Jose's friends or colleagues who said that he was faithful in his unfaithfulness, as though his mistress, he was supposedly faithful to his mistress, but you can't exactly be faithful to a mistress if it is a mistress, by definition. And if he had girlfriends while he was with the mistress, well, that's definitely not being faithful in your unfaithfulness. That's just crazy. So, yes. Anyway, continuing. Fidelity to his marriage vows was not his strong suit. Jose would F an umbrella, one business acquaintance told me. Ouch! That would hurt. And also, he would do that, but not the thing that he's been accused of? Well, maybe. Maybe not. Continuing. In restaurants and at parties all over this town, the only topic that is being discussed as much as or more than the Menendez trial is what is being referred to. What is this? Here, wait. I'm reading ahead. Whoa, what in the world? We go off on a real tangent here. It's all in italics, and I'm not sure what, and there's things I really cannot say. Movie of the week in the chat writes, misbehaving in those ways would make it more likely that you would essay your kids. Well, I mean, no, I mean, yes, no, like somebody being, a complete, what hound does not mean that they're going to do anything to a child. Like, some people are very indiscriminate in their behavior, but they keep it within legal lines. It's nothing that would ever occur to them to do. Other people have no boundaries and have no lines. So it's just something that you can't say. It could go either way. It doesn't, him being indiscriminately, unfaithful to his wife with adult women does not mean that he didn't do it, doesn't mean that he did. It just, there's no correlation necessarily. There are some other things, but yeah, I mean, you're kind of right, but kind of wrong, Okay. Okay, this little sidebar is really weird, but it's kind of fun, and I'm going to try to be careful in how I read it because there's some strange stuff in here. All right, if you really want to know what I'm not able to say, you can read it on the screen. And hopefully that's okay for YouTube too. In restaurants and at parties all over this town, the only topic that is being discussed as much as or more than the Menendez trial is what is being referred to in show business circles as the Heidi Chronicles, which has no relationship whatsoever to Wendy Wasserstein's Pulitzer Prize-winning play of the same name. The Heidi referred to here is Heidi Fleiss, the daughter of a prominent LA pediatrician. As a matter of fact, her dad delivered Madonna's daughter, Lola, the eldest, who is charged with being the newest, youngest, prettiest, newest, youngest, maybe, Hollywood madam to the stars. She was busted in June and turned over her little black book to the authorities. The book is said to contain the names, addresses, and telephone numbers of some very big names in the entertainment industry, as well as some of the customers' specialties. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Now, isn't it funny? Heidi, I should definitely cover the Heidi Fleiss case because that was a crazy fun, tabloidy bit of, crime coverage with show business people and all of that. But it was funny. She had a little black book just like a certain Mr. J.E. had some address books. And nobody who was in Heidi's book really got in any trouble for being in Heidi's book. They weren't prosecuted for hiring girls, for, ladies, women, whatever, for activities that were not legal. And it's an interesting case with, a bunch of interesting characters. LA's full of, just weird, interesting, strange people. So I'm definitely going to have to go into that at some point. But, okay, here's where I'm going to have to be a little careful. Although the newspapers refer to them as unnamed studio executives, everyone here knows who they are, and everyone is insatiable for the latest details. Everyone now knows, for instance, that one prominent fellow in the industry enjoys doing a number 2 on the $1,500 an hour girls and wears plastic baggies on his feet so he won't step in his messes. I'm so disgusting. Hey, you don't need to travel to Dubai to be a porta potty anymore. Well, anymore. It was back then. Oh, gosh. Movie of the Week in the chat writes, why get them in trouble when you can blackmail them later? Well, yeah, but is it blackmail or is it cleanup, right? If your madam gets busted and her contacts are sealed, are you really using that information for blackmail purposes? I mean, you understand who works for whom, right? They would have already known this information, Movie of the Week. There's, Heidi and Madam Alex and all of them, past and present and future, they're not working like, oh no, they're rogue. Like, that's not what happened. Heidi didn't get busted because they wanted to bust a woman who was running this operation. Heidi got busted for, as far as I can tell, a very specific reason. And, basically, don't mouth off, don't go rogue, know who you're working for, and know who not to cross. And that's a lot of the story, as far as I can tell from what I've read. That's what really went down with the Heidi Fleiss situation. But it's like anything. It's like that other business that goes hand in hand with the kind of business that Fleiss was, the face of. That other business that Hollywood people and other kinds of people like to indulge in, that is becoming less of a criminal activity, but is still criminalized in many states and I believe federally under all circumstances. When someone gets taken out, someone else is going to move in. These things are not entirely or at all accidental. I think you know what I'm getting at, but anyway, let's get back to the article. That's why these articles are always so interesting, because every now and then they'll mention names, they'll mention little things that it might not have meant so much at the time, but becomes like way more interesting or important later. How in the OJ case, the Kardashians were almost a footnote, the other Kardashians, not Robert, the attorney. And then look at what they became in later decades. Okay, that's why it's interesting to me to go back and read the old articles. All right. Okay, Baggy's on his feet. Okay. A big studio is said to be involved, and it is predicted that heads will soon roll there. Out here, nothing shocks. I'm trying to think, did anyone actually get fired for being involved in with Heidi Fleiss? Other than Charlie Sheen, I don't remember who was outed. Gosh, that was a while ago, and I have not thought about that in a long time. I'd have to look that up. Okay, out here, nothing shocks. Everything is accepted. Think about those words very, very, very long. Everything is accepted. Oh, hey, Diddy, how you doing? When I evinced surprise at the mention of a certain member of the group who has been long married, I was told matter-of-factly across a dinner table in Beverly Hills that his wife liked, and I'm not going to say that phrase, I'll just say ladies. His wife likes ladies. That's not what this says. Dominick Dunne, you naughty boy. Okay, moving on. In what can only be described as overkill, the defense in the old blame the victim strategy has gone to the greatest lengths to assassinate the character of Kitty Menendez, a deeply unhappy woman heartbroken by her husband's infidelity. Having pumped her full of lead, her sons now participate in killing her again as they listen calmly to their lawyers and cousins' description of her as a desperate, demented, drunken, drugged, I can't say that word, woman, self-deletal woman. Ugh. YouTube, stop making me talk like I'm an imbecile. Who harassed her husband's mistress and was also a dangerous driver and a lousy housekeeper. Well, Dominick Dunne, you've been dragging this woman through the mud, calling her a terrible house decorator. So saying she was a lousy housekeeper isn't really that bad. If she was on pills and booze, and driving, that would have been dangerous, definitely. And yes, definitely, she's a victim. Movie of the week. You read what was on screen. But much like the sons, if they were unhappy in the home, being of age, could have moved out. Kitty, if she was unhappy with her husband and his cheating, she could have moved out and divorced him. And it being California, could have taken a lot of his money. So, okay. And harassing his husband's mistress. It's not called harassing when it's the mistress. I don't think that's harassment. I think it's kind of the other way around. Isn't like sleeping with another person's spouse kind of harassment? Both ways. Doesn't have to be women and men. It could be, well, men and women. You know what I mean. Doesn't have to be the man cheating and the woman being cheated on. Okay, back to the article. According to the defense, there were always dog feces on the floor and ferret feces, dropped by the family's pet ferret under the bed in mom and dad's room, where Lyle was sent to lie when he was bad. Why would you be sent to lie in your parents' bedroom when you were bad? They had multiple rooms in this house. You send a child to their own room. And if you don't want them to play with their toys, I suppose you could send them to a spare room. But gee. There was also a rabbit, Lyle's rabbit. But the parents didn't like the rabbit and wanted Lyle to get rid of it. One morning, they have a ferret is running around and a rabbit. Would they fight? And I've heard that ferrets just go everywhere and that they're very smelly. Nothing against ferrets, but I've heard that they're stinky and they're messy. And I can't imagine you'd want that running around your house. That's kind of... And wait, there's a dog, a ferret, and a rabbit, and they're just running around the house loose, going potty everywhere? What in the entire world is going on in this place? One morning he found it dead in the garbage can. Either mom or dad or both had bashed its head in because Lyle hadn't gotten rid of it as they had ordered him to do. We don't even know that this happened. Was there testimony from other people? According to the defense, did they have like a maid come? Well, I guess they didn't have a maid if their house was covered in mess. To testify that this happened? Was this just a story made up of whole cloth? If you want to get rid of a rabbit, you know how you can easily get rid of a rabbit with no mess? Open a door. It will run out. Like, it's Los Angeles. Like, there's grass. It'll just walk out. I don't know. Movie of the week in the chat writes, ferret feces, that's gross and alliterative. That's right. If that happened, it's some Fatal Attraction level stuff. Well, maybe, but I don't know. We have been told in court that Lyle at 14 was still wetting his bed and that his parents would put the soaking smelly sheets on the breakfast table. Who lives like that? How do you eat breakfast? What? And again, do they have a maid? Because if you're picking up the sheets and putting them on the table, now the table has to be cleaned as well as the sheets. This makes no sense. You've just created extra work, and it doesn't sound like they're making Lyle do that work. We've been told that Kitty threatened to, can I say that on YouTube, poison her family. That she told her sons she hated them. That she could have had a career in broadcasting if she hadn't had them. Oh, well. The defense claims that she knew all along that her husband was emming Erik. You will hear evidence that she never tended to her son while he was throwing up in the bathroom next door to her bedroom after a S episode with his father. I think not helping him with the vomiting is less of an issue than not stopping the causing of the vomiting, but okay. You will also hear evidence that up to the age of 15, Erik's mother would periodically make her son submit to her physical inspections of his business which she called checking you out. Ew, disgusting if true. On and on. We have also heard that in a fit of rage with Lyle, a week before the Kayings, she reached over and pulled off the 21-year-old's hairpiece. He had a wig at 21? Ouch. Leslie Abramson would have us believe that, until that moment, Erik never knew that his brother and protector wore a toupee. No, absolutely not. You live with someone, you're that close to them, you're going to know the situation with the hair on the top of their head. That's insane. You can't, a toupee? Like a whole toupee? No, you're going to know. You're going to know. Movie of the Week writes, it's like that scene from Trainspotting. What scene from Trainspotting? What are you referring to? I'm not sure what you're referring to, Movie of the Week. Sorry. So many wild things have been mentioned here. Okay, continuing with the article. I have always thought that the toupee hadn't been made that I couldn't detect. But the masterpiece of wig making that is affixed to the top of Lyle Menendez's youthful head fooled me completely back in 1990 when I first saw him at some of the early hearings shortly after the arrests. Because he is so young, it never occurred to anyone, not even the police, that he wore one. Well, wait, wouldn't they have found some evidence, like a wig stand or wig tape or wig glue or head polish? I don't know. Oh, excuse me. Oh, right. Oh, Trainspotting. Yes, Movie of the Week in the chat says the dirty sheet scene on the breakfast table. Right, because Spud loses his control of his number 2 region when he's in bed with the girl. And yeah, I remember that. Disgusting, but funny. Okay. The toupee. I can't believe we're going on about the toupee. Second-rate furniture, but a first-rate toupee. Okay. A Beverly Hills detective with whom I have kept in touch told me several years ago that it had been discovered in the Los Angeles County Jail when a fellow prisoner slapped Lyle on the head in the shower and his hair flew off. Slapped him so hard his hair flew off. In the shower. In the shower. Oh my goodness. I can't. And also, he's showering with a wig, but it's not going to come off because of, say, the force of the water. Was he just not putting his head under the faucet? Because if a slap is going to make your wig come off, I'm assuming unless prisons just have atrocious water pressure, which of course, why wouldn't they? I'm sure they do. But, or really, really harsh water pressure. I imagine it's one or the other. But no, and are you shampooing your hairpiece in the shower in prison? I don't understand this. Movie of the Week says in the chat, he's really malding now. Yeah, he really is malding. He should have gotten some of that, whatever Adebisi used to keep that little hat on his head. Because that thing never came off. There you go. That's a joke just for you, Movie of the Week. Okay. Back to the article. Toupees are not allowed in prison because prisoners have been known to hide their stash of, I don't think I can say, can I say that on YouTube? You know, drugs under them. I imagine you might be able to stash something else, like a weapon, like a razor blade or something under it as well. Even Michael Milken had to dispense with his during his period of incarceration. I know you do, Movie of the Week. Anyone remember Michael Milken, the junk bond trader who went to jail for white collar crimes? I bet they will have a before and after Michael Milken picture, because it was very famous that he had to, here he is in more recently. He did his time and then he was released. Here you go. Here's Michael Milken, the before. This was him with his wonderful head of hair. Maury's toupees. Hey, we're looping back, or it's a callback movie of the week. Maury's toupees were serving Michael Milken, and then he went to prison, and he famously had to remove his toupee, and now I guess he's involved in, well, he's a philanthropist, of course he is. So there you go. Michael Milken, the famous white-collar criminal. He's proudly balding and very aged now. Of course, he's got to be in his 80s, I guess. But that was a huge scandal. Anyone too young or doesn't remember, that was a big, big, big 80s. That was like Wall Street, the movie. You know, Greed is Good. That's one of them. Michael Milken was like poster boy for that. Okay, Michael Milken and his toupee. Okay, once Lyle's was detected, he was allowed to wear it only for court appearances. They kept it with the piles of pastel sweaters. Before one such appearance, they should have gotten him a pastel toupee. Maybe that would have made him seem softer and more innocent. Before one such appearance, other prisoners hid it from him, and he had to go into the courtroom without it. Get the heck out of here. What, are you trying to tell me that he was allowed to keep his toupee like a pet or something? Like a pet rock in his cell? And that other prisoners were able to take it? What were they doing? Playing keep away? Like tossing it over his balding head? Come on, guys, come on, give it back. And they're just laughing at him, passing it back and forth. Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. And he had to go into the courtroom without it. It was said at the time that he had shaved his head. Oh yeah, I remember that. Okay. I'm sorry. That's just too funny, playing keep away with his wig. Movie of the week in the chat says, just shave your head and rock the outlaw biker look. Works better for prison. Yeah, I guess so. Other than, yeah, you don't want to give your fellow prisoners any ammunition against you. I don't think a toupee would be a good one. But okay. All right. Family secrets are clearly going to play a big part in the defense strategy. According to Abramson, the exposure of the wig freed Erik to tell his brother what their father had been doing to him. That sounds silly. This, in turn, led Lyle to come to his brother's aid by confronting their father and telling him to stop emming Erik. Jose Menendez allegedly replied, "He is my son, and I will do what I want with him." Wait, I'm confused. The exposure of the wig. Not the okay. The exposure by the mother, not the. I was like, wait, the exposure of the wig in prison? How could they have? I got confused in the timeline. That again, it's written a little confusingly. I guess he's referring to the exposure of the wig by their mother led to the exposure. Although living in this house, I would find it hard to believe that something could be happening to the one brother that the other one wouldn't know, but it's possible. Obviously, it can happen. All right. During the lunch break, a few days later, I was all alone in the corridor outside the courtroom, going over my notes. A young man came up and introduced himself as Craig Signorelli. Hey, it's movie of the week's favorite cheesehead, or the discount Tom Cruise. Here, we'll go back. Back. Peter Lorre. Here's Craig. Craig is We've Got Tom Cruise at Home. Tom Cruise at Home. Okay, that's Craig, who was described as super duper handsome and looking just like Tom Cruise. Kind of. I say Matthew Perry a little bit more on this angle. Back in the day, that's him at trial in the 90s. I guess this is a more recent photo, although he does have an IMDb page. But he appears to be working as a tennis instructor, which makes sense considering the Menendez connection. So that's Craig. Of course, I knew who he was. He had been Erik Menendez's best friend. 3 years ago, I had tried to interview him without success. His family had sent him out of town to avoid the publicity. Now I asked the young man, who was due to testify as a prosecution witness the next day, to sit down and talk. He accepted, but said he would not answer any questions about the case. He told me that he and his father were not on speaking terms. He said, well, I guess he and Erik could relate. He told me that, where was it? Oh, he said that he was still at the University of California at Santa Barbara, and that students there had been quite kind to him when they found that he was a friend of one of the notorious Menendez brothers and would testify at their trial. We chatted for a while. Then people began coming back from lunch. Later, during an afternoon break, I encountered him again in the corridor. "May I ask you one question? It's not about the case." He said, "Ask it. I'm not sure I'll answer." I said, "Did you know that Lyle Menendez wore a rug?" He smiled. "Yes," said Erik's former best friend. Everybody knows. Everybody knew. Everybody always knows. And if they don't say anything, they're just being nice. Okay, there's that one person who totally didn't understand, and all the other friends are like, "How did you not know?" Like, "I don't know." There's always the one, right? There is. Okay, back to the article. With the Menendez brothers, best friends came and went, usually following betrayals. For the most part, the best friends of theirs who appeared as witnesses for the prosecution seemed to be a pretty shabby bunch. Lyle's friends from Princeton, Donovan Goudreau, whose stolen driver's license Erik used to buy the Mossberg 12-gauge shotguns, and Glenn Stevens, who was in the car with Lyle when he was arrested, came off as liars. Stevens also came off as a user of his rich friend, in it for the money. At the time of the arrest, he was wearing one of Lyle's 2 Rolex watches, which he later sold to a jeweler friend of his father's and kept the money. Why was he allowed to have one of? I don't have a friend who has access to my watches, that's for sure. I don't understand, why would he be wearing? Oh, unless it was a payoff, of course. He also admitted to pilfering from the cash register of a restaurant Lyle had purchased in Princeton with his brand new wealth. In a devastating cross-examination by Jill Lansing, Lyle's attorney, who never lost her Grace Kelly elegance as she zeroed in on him for his betrayals of his former friend, Stevens remarked, "Friendship transcends a lot of things, but homicide is not one of them." It was his single sympathetic line, but it didn't seem consonant with anything else he said. It sounded rehearsed, as if some advisor had said to him, "Fit this in somewhere." Okay, Donovan Goudreau. I didn't look up whatever happened to that guy. They did mention him in the last, yesterday's article, and I didn't remember that he was mentioned as a Princeton friend of Lyle's. It seemed, maybe I missed that, but it seemed like it was just this random person who Lyle had taken his ID and used it. So I guess this is him at the trial back in the day. He's certainly very, he almost has a Gavin Newsom-y kind of vibe. And then I guess this is him now. Let's see, what does that say? Talk markets? Let's see. So this is Donovan today, CEO, COO, multifamily real estate investment. Okay, yeah, it just seems like a family shop, if you will. They take care of their family's money, probably, or something along those lines. Okay, well, all right. So there's Donovan for you, and back to the article. I didn't look up Glenn Stevens simply because that's such a common name, but there might be a whatever happened to article about these people. I'm sure with monsters being on the air, there probably is. So maybe I'll check that out later during the break or for the next stream, because as I said, there are 5 articles, and since we're coming up, if you're watching this or listening to this stream live, it is almost 20 before the hour. Depending on where you are, it would be a different hour, but I am going to take a little break shortly and then come back to finish the article. I'm going to get to about halfway, if you can see the little marker here, the scroll tab on the scroll bar, about halfway, and then I'm going to take a break and refresh my cup of tea, my cup, which actually looks almost exactly like that cup right there, and then we will finish the article. But if you are tuning in for the first time, this is French Dip Empire. I am the Empress, and we are covering Dominick Dunne's articles on the Menendez brothers trial for Vanity Fair back in the 90s. Yesterday's stream covered his first article from October 1990, and then this article is from October 1993. And getting back to reading that article. Okay. Watching Erik and Lyle Menendez look at their former best friends with their good suits and semi-promising lives, I wonder if they ever think, was the rampage worth it? The hotel to be at these days is the Chateau Marmont on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. It has been done over but not done up, and has returned to its glory days in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Garbo slept here. Betty Davis slept here. So did many other luminaries of those decades. 11 years ago, however, John Belushi cooled here, and everyone jumped ship. The place went into decline. Now there are models and musicians in the elevators again, and literary gatherings sponsored by Buzz, the LA magazine, where authors read from their works in the vast lobby, which looks like something out of an Italian palazzo. I have read there, and Jeffrey Archer has, and Gita Mehta, and today a few hundred of Sandra Bernhardt's friends are coming to hear her read from her new book, Love, Love, and Love. She has been supplied with a bouncer to keep out the wrong crowd. Oh no, what? Madonna? Anyone remember when Sandra Bernhardt and Madonna were running around together? Does anyone remember Sandra Bernhardt? I think we remember Madonna because she runs around being embarrassing nowadays. I'm looking at these names and I'm thinking, okay, you have to be over a certain age to remember John Belushi and even know what happened at the Chateau Marmont that is relevant to this article, or relevant to what they're talking about. Anyway, I'm not going to catch up on all of these. If you know, you know. If you don't, you don't. Okay, a bouncer. And for old time's sake, there was a fight down the hall at 4:30 this morning. Open up! I know my sister's in there! Someone yelled, and a noisy scene ensued. After all, no one wants the place to get too proper. There is not a single sympathetic character in the minute. I like the little italicized segments seem to be color commentary. Like, this is what's going on in LA, just to kind of set the scene outside of the trial. I enjoy it, although it's not the most Menendez-y, is it? Okay, there is not a single sympathetic character in the Menendez story. There is no one to root for. This is as lousy a bunch of human beings as you could find. Wow. I thought we were not trashing the victim earlier, and now we're trashing the victims, as well as the perps. They are not from the lower depths, outcasts of society. These people did not want for anything. Well, they seemed to want for love and kindness and decency. They were rich people, nouveau riche people, a miserably unhappy family, all living together in a house of hate. I'm sure it's not the only one in LA, or, anywhere. Lyle Menendez always wanted a Porsche, but his father would give him only an Alfa Romeo, which Lyle told one of his friends at Princeton was a piece of S, except he actually said it. He did get his Porsche, however, soon after he K'd his father. We know that both brothers are expert liars. Erik won a prize as Best Actor at Beverly Hills High, the locale of the hit TV series Beverly Hills 90210, and briefly considered becoming an actor. Remember their moving eulogies and their 911 telephone call to the police, saying they had come home from the movies and found their parents dead? By now, that tape has been played on radio and television hundreds of times. There could not have been a better performance of grief and hysteria. It fooled a lot of people for a long time. Later that night, they were questioned by Sergeant Thomas W. Edmonds, a 32-year veteran of the Beverly Hills Police Department, who found them so credible that he didn't even ask them to submit to the test routinely carried out in shotgun murders to see if their hands carried shotgun blast residue. I'm sorry, it's not just shotguns, it's any kind of weapon like that. And that is absolutely shocking. I didn't know that. And that's crazy that they didn't do the tests. I mean, that's just routine. It's absolutely routine. It's impossible to believe that even if they were found credible, that wouldn't have been done. I'm genuinely surprised. Okay, and this is what happened during the first stream. When I was reading the first article from 1990, there were just all these weird things that popped up. And why did that happen? Why was that done? Why was that not done? Who was this person? What are they doing? A lot of weirdnesses, a lot of odd things. And this is one of them. Although this is egregious. I mean, this is... Okay. All right, back to the article. As they talked that night, they suggested that the mafia might have been involved. And a few days later, when Lyle hired bodyguards to protect him, he was so convincing when he said that he was afraid he and his brother might be K'd by the same people who had K'd their parents, that the bodyguards, for the first time in their careers, wore bulletproof vests. Well, I mean, they were hired to protect people whose parents had been shotgunned, so that kind of makes sense. We have been told that a relation of the boys who will testify for the defense will tell the jury that Jose Menendez's credo for success was cheat, steal, lie, but win. And his sons took his advice, at least partly. They cheated, they stole, and they lied. Oh boy, did they lie. But they did not win. To the bitter end, they failed to meet their father's expectations of them. The latest, it's an italic section. Okay, here comes the gossip. The latest restaurant to find favor with the industry moguls is the very small Locanda Veneta on 3rd, across from Cedars Sinai Hospital, which is crammed full every night. Lots of famous folk were squeezed together the night I was there. Don Steele, the film producer, who was once the head of Columbia Pictures, introduced me to Michael Eisner, the $60 million a year CEO of Disney. Eisner shakes hands without looking at the person he is being introduced to. Okay, now that just sounds awfully, awfully, awfully rude, but here's the thing that I think is weird. I suppose, is he suggesting, Dominick Dunne, that Eisner didn't look at him when he was introduced to him? Does Eisner never look at the face of the person he is being introduced to? Because I would imagine that he might want to remember a face. And so I'm thinking, did Eisner decide that Dominick Dunne wasn't worth the look, but someone else who he decided was good enough would be worth the look? However, Dunne writes it as he shakes hands without looking at the person he is being introduced to, as though this is just common behavior, but it may not be. Movie of the Week in the chat says, that's rude, Eisner. Yes, Eisner being rude, but that's what you get to be when you're the head of Disney, right? You get to be rude. Yeah, wow. He was CEO of Disney from 1984 until 2005. That is a long time. I realized he was there for a long time, but I didn't realize it was quite that long. Okay. So back to the article. The very expensive Menendez defense is being paid for with money from the $14 million estate of the parents, the brothers Cade. From the beginning, it was the immediate response of everyone in the family, including all the potential contingent heirs and executors, that estate assets be used to pay for the trial of Lyle and Erik. A sad figure in the story is Maria Menendez, the 75-year-old grandmother of Lyle and Erik, and the mother of the slain Jose. One day, I watched her drive up alone to the courthouse in a beat-up old beige car, looking for a place to park. Apparently, Jose's largesse in the car department. The courtyard of the house on North Elm was filled with expensive family cars when he was alive. Did not extend to his mother. Okay, but Lyle and Erik were buying cars after their parents died. They didn't buy a car for their grandmother. Remember, the first article mentioned that the grandmother was living in the house, the Menendez house in Calabasas with the girlfriends, with Lyle and Erik's girlfriends. So why would she not have had access to the cars? Were the cars repossessed? If I recall, it was a Jeep. And, the Porsche, right, of course, the Porsche and a Jeep. So maybe she didn't want to drive a sports car like a Porsche. Maybe she didn't feel comfortable being 75, climbing up into a Jeep. She couldn't get one of the girlfriends to drive her. Sad. And remember, this is the days before Uber and Lyft, so have to drive your own car or get a ride. Okay, back to the article. There is something noble about old Mrs. Menendez. For several years after the slayings, she steadfastly maintained that her grandsons, whom she refers to as the boys — everyone refers to them as the boys, even though they're not boys — were innocent, and nothing could dissuade her from that belief. People said that even if she had seen a videotape of her grandsons emming her son, the other murdering her son, she would have said that the tape was rigged. Even with the admissibility of Erik's confession to Oziel that he and Lyle killed their parents, Maria Menendez, according to a close friend, clings to the belief that the mafia murdered her son and got rid of the shotguns, which have never been recovered. Now, flanked by her daughters, she has to listen to defense lawyers depict her successful and powerful son as a child committing with her grandsons. Yeah, that's pretty awful. Oh boy, there's going to be more of this just absolute unpleasantness. So, okay. All right. I'll try to get through this as cleanly as I can, because there's going to be a lot of things that YouTube not friendly language, not YouTube friendly language. So bear with me. Leslie Abramson, in her opening statement to Erik's jury, conceded that Erik had indeed confessed to the killings in a tentative fashion to Craig Signorelli and later to the psychologist, Dr. L. Jerome Oziel. But, she stressed, he did not tell them the true motivation for the killings. To do that, he would have had to reveal the shameful, in his opinion, secrets that he had spent most of his life concealing. Excuse me. For 12 years between the ages of 6 and 18, my client Erik Menendez was SM'd by his father. The most recent M, she said, had taken place only 1 week before the homicides. Wow, okay. Abramson claimed that the pattern of M had started out as inappropriate touching and, I guess I can say that, arousal of Erik, and had escalated in a carefully calculated pattern of grooming the child for his father's gratification. This pattern included repeated acts of I can't say any of this, but it's all in things that one might do with a consenting adult. Various things that would be between consenting adults involving different acts and parts of the people. And it also specifically mentions the intentional infliction of pain by the use of foreign objects. And I'll just leave it at that. Jose Menendez's obvious purpose was to use, I don't really want to say that either, but obviously he looked at his own child as something for a certain type of gratification that is not only criminal, but immoral beyond pretty much anything, maybe anything. Continuing with the article. These allegations have yet to be proved by the defense, but the litany of Jose Menendez's deviation, as described by Abramson, was shocking in the extreme and must have been devastating for Maria Menendez and her daughters to have to listen to. The following morning, I described this moment on the television show Good Morning America. My exact words were, I sat directly behind Maria Menendez, who was the grandmother of the two boys, who was the mother of Jose, and she and her two daughters, the aunts of the two boys, and the sisters of Jose. Nothing happened on their faces as they heard these extraordinary charges of something I can't say. You know, the SM, the SA stuff. In fact, the women were behaving in the accepted courtroom manner of showing no emotion. Crying, crying out, or any other outward display of emotion can get a family member removed from the courtroom as being prejudicial to the jury. Later in the courtroom, one of Maria's daughters, Marta Menendez Cano, a stockbroker in West Palm Beach, who is said to resemble her late brother physically. Ooh, that's a dubious description, isn't it? I don't know that most women would want to be... Remember, if a movie of the week you're listening, you might remember from yesterday's stream in the first article, Kitty Menendez was described by one of her husband's business colleagues as being Jose in a wig, and it sounds like that's the way that Dominick Dunne is describing Jose's sister, which, if you've seen the picture of Jose in a wig would not be a beautiful sight, I would say, but hopefully Marta wears the looks a little bit better as a lady. Okay. So she became furious with me. With her eyes flashing and her face contorted with rage, she turned around to glare at me as she copied down my name from my name tag. At the next break, she called an informal press conference and attacked me, saying that she and her sister had trouble holding back tears and that her mother had been in a near fetal position. Mrs. Menendez was not in a near fetal position, nor did I see any evidence that the sisters were holding back tears. Movie of the week in the chat says, oh yeah, Jose in a wig, lol, yeah. Okay, back to the article. Marta Cano took my statement of their demeanor as a criticism of the family's lack of feeling. I made no apologies, didn't even attempt to correct her. I simply watched her twisted, angry face, a foot or so away from mine. Was what I was seeing firsthand directed at me personally? I wondered. The Menendez temper the defense had been describing? My God, I thought, is this what Jose was like when he was displeased? Despite all, Marta Menendez remains loyal to her grandsons. Sometimes the boys turn to her during the day and manage a little smile or raise their eyebrows in a sort of greeting. As the prosecution came to a close, Maria Menendez stopped coming to court. Someone close to the family told me that she does not want to hear her daughter Marta testify about Jose. All right, I'm going to read this little italicized blurb, and then I'm going to take about a 5-minute break and refresh my tea, stretch my legs, and then come back and finish the second half of this article. So let's read the italicized gossip section that Dominick threw in, giving you a little of the LA flavor in among the trial coverage. In what could become one of the great Hollywood scandals of all time, oh, here we go. Superstar Michael Jackson is under criminal investigation for allegedly emming the 13-year-old stepson of a millionaire California businessman at his fairy tale ranch, Neverland. What could become one of the great Hollywood scandals of all time. Yes. The boy reportedly told his therapist that Jackson had, been inappropriate with him. His natural father, a Beverly Hills dentist, ordered his ex-wife to keep the boy away from the pop star. A private investigator working for Jackson claimed that the police investigation was the result of an extortion gone awry after Jackson refused to pay $20 million to an unidentified woman for her silence. Jackson, on tour in Thailand, which is not a suspicious place for someone who was accused of what he was accused of doing at all, has denied any guilt, saying, "I am horrified by these allegations," as we all are and were. Okay, so I've come to my break. This is French Dip Me Empire. I am the Empress. I am going to take my break now and come back with the conclusion of the second half of this Dominick Dunne article from 1993 about the Menendez brothers' trial. And I will be back shortly. Hello, hello, hello. I am back from my break with a new cup of tea. If you're just joining us, I certainly am, rejoining. This is French Dip Empire, and I am the Empress. This is my online empire, my virtual empire, where we talk about, well, honestly, whatever I feel like. Today, we're talking about the Menendez brothers. I'm not usually a big true crime fan. I'm more a scandals and gossip kind of gal, but I'm a big fan of Dominick Dunne, the writer, and I decided to delve into the archives of Vanity Fair magazine and take a look at Dominick Dunne's trial coverage of the Menendez brothers' trial as it happened back in the 1990s. So today's stream is covering an article from October of 1993. This is the second article that Dominick Dunne wrote for Vanity Fair about the Menendez brothers. And yesterday's stream, I read through his entire first article, which was from 1990. Now that was before the trial had actually started, and in this article, in 1993, the trial had begun. In 1990, they had been arrested and charged, but the trial had not begun. And in 93, they were in the courtroom. So we are in the middle of the article, about halfway through. And we just read the little italicized blurb here throughout the article. Dominick Dunne has put some little bits of LA flavor, little gossip, little blurb here in the trial coverage. And this was about Michael Jackson and his what could become one of the great Hollywood scandals of all time, Michael Jackson and the kid allegations. So, yes, very prescient. It did indeed become one of the great Hollywood scandals. So, getting back to the Menendez brothers article. And we're back with Craig Signorelli, the man, who was described in the first article as the Tom Cruise lookalike. And I love to show that this is not this guy, that's Donovan. That's Craig, our Tom Cruise lookalike. So, Tom Cruise lookalike. Craig Signorelli looked, acted, and seemed like a rich Beverly Hills kid, although he was from Calabasas, an upper middle-class suburb in the northwestern part of the San Fernando Valley, where the Menendez family had lived before a pair of burglaries committed by their sons drove them to move virtually overnight to Beverly Hills. At the time of the killings, Signorelli's father was a prominent television executive at one of the major film studios. On the 2 days Craig Signorelli testified in court, he showed up with two young pretty girls in miniskirts who giggled a lot, causing Leslie Abramson to complain to the judge about them. Okay. Erik turns out to have been quite a confessor, although his confessions tend to vary in detail. His first confession before the confession to Dr. Oziel was to his one-time best friend, Craig Signorelli. A year before Jose and Kitty Menendez were killed, Erik and Craig wrote a screenplay called Friends, about a rich boy who sees his father's will and then goes upstairs and murders his parents. Judge Weisberg did not allow the screenplay itself to be introduced as evidence at the trial, but certainly the screenplay seemed to be the genesis of the crimes that were to follow. Erik's confession to Craig took place 12 days after the bloody shootings in the house on North Elm Drive. Also in the house at the time was a second computer expert brought in to search for Jose's last will, in which some of his money had supposedly been left to people other than his sons. Signorelli said on the stand that Erik had asked him, "Do you want to know how it happened?" Signorelli said, "Yes." He said he was coming home from a movie and that he was going inside to get his ID, a fake ID, to go out to the bars. He said that he went back outside and his brother was standing there with 2 shotguns and said, "Let's do it." And they walked inside, and Lyle was standing, or Erik went up to the door on the left, which was slightly open. Lyle went up and put his shoulder against the door on the right, and Erik said he looked in, saw his parents sitting on the couch, and Lyle swung open the door and, I guess I can say this on YouTube, shot his father and looked at Erik and said, "Shoot Mom." And Erik said he shot his mom and she was standing up yelling. That was it. We just went on with the conversation after that. Then they played chess in the living room. "You didn't ask Erik, why did you do it, did you?" asked Leslie Abramson on cross. "No," replied Signorelli. Well, that doesn't read as true unless you already knew. I would imagine you would have a million questions to ask if someone told you something like that. Unless you already know the answers? Maybe. Later, when the police arrived at the Signorelli's house in Calabasas and told Craig he was a suspect, he repeated to them what Erik had told them. Or I guess told him. Wait, he repeated to them what Erik had told the police? I guess that's what that sentence is meant to say. "You told the officers on November 17 that what Erik told you was Lyle was to shoot my dad and I was supposed to shoot my mother. We went into the room and Lyle and pointed the gun and shot him." That might be a typo. "He then went over and shot him in the head." Can I even say this? Or is YouTube going to give me guff about it? I was unable to... I don't know if I can say... I don't want to get in trouble with YouTube here. "Unable to shoot my mom and she tried to get away. Lyle shot her too. After it looked like my mother was dead, I shot her twice with my gun." Okay. Craig Signorelli agreed to wear a body wire when he next saw his best friend and see if he could get him to tell more. They met at Gladstone's, a well-known fish restaurant near the beach. "You were willing to help the police get your best friend arrested, right?" asked Abramson, her voice filled with contempt. "That's correct." The police put a wire under his shirt, and he was given a calculator with a wire in it to place on the table as a backup listening device. Excuse me, who carries a calculator around with them? No one? And you would go out to have a meal and put it on the table? No, that would be so incredibly suspicious, so incredibly bizarre. No one would do that. That's crazy. But the wires were a bust. That night, Erik had a different story. He said in effect that he shouldn't have said what he said before. He told Craig that he and Lyle didn't K their parents. At one point, Abramson's voice turned mean. "So you're putting your story together to match when the computer person came up." Signorelli replied, "I'm not putting my story together. You can twist my story. I'm just telling the truth." Another time, her voice filled with disdain, Abramson said, "Do you like to be the center of attention at parties, among friends? In fact, you got dressed up today to be on camera." Lady, everyone in the courtroom got dressed up today to be on camera. What are you, crazy? Okay. Movie of the week in the chat says, "Oh God, I remember the MJ stuff." And yeah, why would be the big question on my mind? Well, yeah. I would also think you would ask questions like, how did you feel? What did you do, afterward? I mean, that it's a pretty shocking thing to do. You're there with your brother. You've both done this. Like, you're orphans now. How do you feel? What are you thinking? How are you behaving? I would think there would be a million questions, but that's just me. I don't think I could focus on a chess game after that, but okay. These people are built a little different. Okay, in fact, Signorelli had asked several times not to be on TV. Handsome, sure of himself, someone who enjoys mind games and is a good strategist in chess. He seemed almost to enjoy his cross-examination by Abramson. He was good at sparring with her, and she never threw him. Okay, but this is interesting because I could swear that in the 1990 article that I read yesterday, that it said that Signorelli was enjoying being on television, that he wanted to be in front of the cameras. And he has an IMDb page. I don't know if all of his credits involve talking about the Menendez case on, chat shows or news programs or something like that. But this is Tom Cruise light. He clearly wanted some attention. He showed up with the two miniskirt girls, right? The giggly girls. Sounds like he likes attention, but I guess I can also understand why he might not have, wanted to be on TV. But it seems like they're saying both. Movie of the Week says in the chat, they're really into chess. Yes, they really are. It's funny because, well, I wasn't going to. I'm not going to say that. Oh, great. We got another italicized gossip section. I love these. This might be my favorite part of this article. He did not write these into the first article, although that was full of that Judalon Smith stuff, which was just crazy town. And that was the most entertaining part of yesterday's article. I think these italicized sections are the most entertaining of this article. So here we go. The billionaire oil and real estate magnate Marvin Davis and his wife Barbara cut short their annual south of France sojourn at the Hôtel du Cap in Antibes after having been robbed at gunpoint in their limousine of $12 million in jewels and a lot of cash. Despite reports to the contrary, Barbara Davis's friends tell me that nothing has been recovered except a very large solitaire diamond ring. The Davises are said to be no longer enchanted with France. When they walked into Spago for the first time after the holdup, they were greeted in French by Bernard, the maître d', who has since left to start his own restaurant. "Don't speak to me in French," Barbara Davis is said to have cried. "I don't want to hear French again, and I don't ever want to eat French fried potatoes or French toast." Well, lady, just wait a few years and you can get freedom fries. And I guess you could get some freedom toast, too. If you're not familiar with Barbara and Marvin Davis, you are without knowing it, perhaps. They used to be the parents-in-law of one of the... which one? One of Paris Hilton's aunts. The one with the issues. You know how the two Real Housewives? Kim... and the other one, Kyle. Kyle's the brunette, right? Kim is the blonde. She's the older one, I think. The one with the issues. She used to be married to one of Marvin and Barbara Davis's sons. And Marvin and Barbara Davis are also the grandparents of Greasy and Gummy Bear, Jason and Brandon Davis. If you remember them, Brandon, am I getting them right? Jason is deceased. And Brandon is the one who coined the term firecrotch for Lindsay Lohan back in the day. Back when Paris and Lindsay were like running around, falling out of cars and exposing their lack of underpants, that era. Yeah. So Brandon, Jason, and then the what's her name? Richard's woman. They were all related. They are all or were related to Marvin and Barbara Davis. There you go. As I said, these names from the past, they have more relevance, like more interesting relevance in the future, but it was like you couldn't see into the future to realize that in 30 years we were going to have the Real Housewives TV show and the Kardashians, who also sort of figure into this. There's the Calabasas connection, that's for sure. Okay. Back to the article. Leslie Abramson, who in private conversations uses the word F a lot, hey, that don't make you a bad person, is best described by a number of other F words. Flamboyant, feisty, formidable, fascinating, and occasionally very funny. She is also occasionally truly frightening. I would rather walk through fire than be cross-examined by her. On the other hand, in the unlikely circumstance that I ever committed a M or two, the one where you unalive a person, not the one where you do something else, my first call would be to Leslie Abramson. So far, she has saved 12 people from death row. Several years ago in Los Angeles, she represented a Pakistani doctor who was accused of, oh boy, I hope I can say this, strangling his 11-year-old son and cutting him up into 200 pieces. Did they count? In what must be considered a landmark case, Abramson got the doctor acquitted. Are you kidding me? How? Oh my goodness. She had only to establish a reasonable doubt in the jury's mind. Wait, it says reasonable. And she did exactly that. I want to know how. Later, she sued the doctor because she claimed he had paid her only a portion of the fee they had agreed on, and the case was settled. I wonder if he settled it with a check that he wrote out and then cut into 200 little pieces. It would be appropriate. She is well known for establishing close relationships with her clients, almost all of whom are charged with M. When I was writing my articles about the Menendez brothers 3 years ago, she described them to me as adorable. Apparently, she still thinks they are. She giggles with Erik and is very touchy-feely with him. She is constantly patting him on the back or picking a piece of lint off his shirt or straightening his collar. Some have interpreted this behavior as flirtatious, others as maternal. She changes moods, sometimes from one sentence to the next. In courthouse encounters, she is alternatively friendly and hostile, and totally unpredictable. Socially, she moves about LA, not just in legal circles, but also with some of the art, film, and literary crowds. People I know who have dined with her say she is a highly entertaining guest at dinner parties. I bet. In the courtroom, she plays to the house, to the camera, to members of the Menendez family, and to the juries. She strikes poses. She mugs. She rolls her eyes in exasperation. Her voice can be mean, argumentative, sarcastic, withering. She also interrupts testimony, but she has met her match in Judge Stanley M. Weisberg. Weisberg, who presided at the first Rodney King trial, oh boy, is in total command of his courtroom, and no amount of histrionics ever sways his rulings. At one point, Judge Weisberg leaned forward and said to Abramson, "It is the custom of this court, when counsel wishes to be heard, to raise your hand and ask, 'May I be heard, Your Honor?'" He emphasized the last words, "Your Honor," and Abramson apologized. "I'm sorry," said Abramson, but her apology did not seem to be heartfelt, merely the right words for the court record. "That would indicate to me that you were disapproving of my ruling, which you have a right to do. But if you do that and display that to the jury, that is your comment on my ruling to the jury. And if you do that again, I'm going to hold you in contempt." Over and over, Abramson insisted that the M word for unaliving someone, not be used in the courtroom. Wait, wouldn't that be the charge? Because she was claiming self-defense for the brothers. However, Pamela Bozanich, the prosecutor, insisted on using the word, and eventually Judge Weisberg overruled Abramson's objection to its use. Yeah, that's ridiculous. Her saying don't use the word, that's crazy. Okay. During Abramson's cross-examination of Dr. Oziel, Judge Weisberg admonished her so strongly that a less resolute lawyer would have left the courtroom in tears. Not Abramson. Oh no. She jokingly pretends to an indifference about the trial. "I'm so bored with this," she said while sitting in a spectator seat, chatting with the media one day. "Oh, I'm so bored with chatting with the media and getting attention and more publicity for myself and my law practice. Please." Awesome. What a character. "I do it all day in court. I go home and watch it on TV. Then the next morning I read about it in the paper. Everywhere I go, that's all people ask me about. This has been going on for 3 years. It gets so boring." It was obvious that she did not mean it was boring at all. It is what she loves doing. She is never without a backup plan or an answer. One day when we were all in the corridor, the lawyers were told that they could go into the courtroom, but the media would have to wait. Walking in, she said to me playfully, "I'd let you in with me if you were a friend." I answered, trying to match her tone, "What do you mean? I gave you a big plug on TV this morning." She turned around, looked at me, and said scathingly, "I don't need a plug." Ooh, it's italicized gossip section. Here we go. Several of the reporters on the Menendez trial also covered the Rodney King trials. I hope everyone knows what that is. I'm not going over that. The second King jury, who were together for so long, just held their first get-together. Word was that they were upset with the lenient sentence of 2.5 years given to officers Kuhn and Powell. A lot of people in the city were upset too. However, the riots so many people feared might be sparked by the sentencing did not occur. Now the members of the ethnically mixed jury in the Reginald Denny trial have been seated. Reginald Denny is the white man who was pulled out of his truck during the LA riots and nearly beaten to death. I remember that well. Whatever the verdict is in this case, there is enormous fear that trouble in the streets could come again. Okay, not so gossipy. I'm disappointed. Oh well. The defense attorneys fought long and hard to keep the grisly crime scene and autopsy photographs from being shown to the jury, saying that they were too gruesome and gory, more prejudicial than probative. You have to be able to see the photos of what happened. If it's gory, it's gory. If it's gruesome, it's gruesome. Ridiculous. The 39-year-old Wellesley-educated prosecutor, Pamela Bozanich, responded strongly. "Those who have committed crimes like these, it ill behooves them to complain of the carnage they leave." Okay. Allegedly, innocent until proven guilty, lady. Judge Weisberg ruled in favor of the prosecution. Only 5 pictures of the actual murder scene the M scene of the dead bodies covered with. I've even heard people edit saying the word blood. I'm not even on YouTube. I don't even know if that's something YouTube gets upset about. I guess we're just chancing it here. Of the dead bodies covered with blood in the family room were shown. The others were autopsy pictures of the wounds, with most of the blood, guts, and matter washed away. A contact wound is one inflicted when the muzzle of the gun is placed against the head, face, or body as it is fired. In Los Angeles police parlance, these wounds are called rat holes. Jose Menendez's contact wound was to the back of the head. It was the last of the 5 shots fired into him. The most gruesome picture was of Kitty Menendez's dead face. Her contact wound was on her cheek. One eye and part of her nose were missing. However, her other eye was open and staring out. You could not help but think she was watching her son deliver the coup de grace. He used basically that same line in the first article. Both juries were riveted. There was total silence in the courtroom. Erik Menendez's already pale face was sick white during the showing of the photographs. Mostly he kept his head down as they were displayed on 2 bulletin boards. Occasionally he would raise his head, grab a quick look, then lower his eyes again. Throughout the grim proceedings, Abramson kept patting him on the back with comforting strokes, as if he were the mourner rather than carer of his parents. Okay, italics again. On July 30, Army Archer, the venerable columnist of Daily Variety, broke the news that Joyce Haber had died, scooping even the Los Angeles Times, for which Haber once wrote a gossip column. Haber was regarded as one of Hollywood's most powerful women, the successor to Hedda Hopper and Luella Parsons, but she wore out her welcome in town, became despised, and was banished to total obscurity after she lost her job at the Times. She died forsaken and forgotten at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Well, at least she died someplace glamorous. Her single visitor in the last week of her life was her former hairdresser. A Beverly Hills doctor said about her, "The only person I ever knew who took more pills than Joyce was Judy Garland." Well, good Lord. That's a dubious distinction, again. Taking more pills than Judy. Oof. Dr. L. Jerome Oziel on Primetime Live with Diane Sawyer. Oh, she got his girlfriend, or the ex-mistress, too. She interviewed Judel on. Dr. L. Jerome Oziel on Primetime Live with Diane Sawyer on July 15, 1993. Okay, so this is a quote from him. "A therapist is like a priest or minister in a sense that people come in and confess. I, and any therapist, carries with him or with her at all times hundreds or thousands of people's secrets, and it is a sacred obligation to preserve those secrets, unless the law mandates that one does otherwise." Dr. L. Jerome Oziel in Cross-Examination by Leslie Abramson, August 4, 1993. Abramson, "Is it a basic tenet of therapeutic treatment that patients be told that what they tell their psychologists are like what they tell their priests, confidential?" Oziel, "No. I wouldn't ever make the analogy that what patients tell their psychotherapist is the equivalent of what they tell their priest." Oops, he contradicted himself. Look at that. Possibly the most fateful moment in this story was when Kitty Menendez's psychologist, Dr. Les Summerfield, recommended Dr. L. Jerome Oziel as a therapist for her sons. At the time, the Menendez family was living in one house in Calabasas while rebuilding a bigger, grander one nearby. In 1988, the Menendez brothers became involved in a burglary and a grand theft. These burglaries were not inconsequential. They involved money, property, and some serious jewelry in the $100,000 range, taken from the safes in neighbors' houses. Oh, okay, wow, I didn't realize they were safe cracking. Or I guess not cracking if you know the combo, but, or does it count as safe cracking if you actually use the combination? Like if you have it and use it, not if you put a stethoscope up and listen for the clicks like they do in movies? I'm not sure about the terminology there. Okay, one of Erik's friends who had discovered the combination to the safe of a friend's father participated in the first heist. Well, who was that? That friend who was cut out of the second burglary turned them in. Oh, Jose Menendez berated his sons, although not for the reason one would assume. He berated them for getting caught. Yes, I was once told by a family member that the mistake that President Richard Nixon made was not, or that Nixon's mistake with the Watergate burglary was not the break-in, it was getting caught. Thank you, family member. Great morals and ethics lessons for me as a child. I was told this as a child. Don't worry, even then I knew that's not right. I mean, it kind of was, like, don't get caught. Sure, that's a mistake, but, you know. Anyway, Jose Menendez was a take charge kind of guy. And once again, he took charge. The jewels were returned. The money was repaid. At the time, Lyle was about to go to Princeton. And where would they have fenced jewelry? I mean, you can spend money, but jewels are harder to fence, especially if it's in like a setting. You'd have to have it, it's more identifiable if you have, say, a ring or a necklace, as opposed to taking the gems out of the settings, for example. Movie of the Week in the chat says, it's right from a pragmatic, if not moral, standpoint. Well, one could argue that it is not pragmatic to be immoral, but that's another discussion. If I ever decide to have a philosophy stream, I'll start up a different channel and have those discussions. So let's see. Okay, repaid the money, returned the jewels. At the time, Lyle was about to go to Princeton. It had been the fondest wish of Jose's life to have his son accepted at that Ivy League university. Why Princeton? I mean, there are other Ivies. He was always ashamed that he had gone to Queens College in Flushing, New York, since most of his business associates were from Ivy League schools. Well, that's even more impressive then, actually. So that there would be no black mark against Lyle that might affect his acceptance, Jose decided that Erik, who was underage at the time, would take the fall for both boys. In a deal worked out by their lawyer, Erik got probation and compulsory counseling. Lyle did attend Princeton, but he was suspended after one term for cheating in Psychology 101. And again, as I said on the last stream, if you are cheating in your first semester at school and at Psych 101, which is not a difficult class, you really not even making the effort. You're not even trying. His father insisted that he continue to live in Princeton so that Jose would not have to admit to his business colleagues that his son no longer attended the university. The name Oziel, pronounced Oziel, sounds like a name out of Dickens or Trollope, where the sound of the name depicts the character of the character. Had the Menendezes bothered to check up on Oziel rather than just accepting the recommendation of Dr. Summerfield, they would have found that he was on a 5-year probation at the time for unethical conduct. Well, that makes me wonder, why was Dr. Summerfield recommending him? And what was up with Dr. Summerfield? Like, why would he be recommending a shady guy, even if the shady guy wasn't on probation? And if you're on probation, you shouldn't be accepting new clients, should you? That sounds like that might not be correct. Okay, one of his patients had been unable to pay his bill and said that at Oziel's suggestion, he had made a verbal contract to work off the bill by doing more than 300 hours of manual work on the Oziel family's house and grounds. Such an arrangement is called a dual relationship, and because of the potential for conflict of interest, it is frowned upon by the American Psychological Association. Not to mention that a verbal contract is no contract at all. When a rich boy steals, it is not because he needs money to eat or because he wants to buy something that his family cannot afford. The Menendez boys had everything, including their own cars, the use of their parents' credit cards, private tennis lessons, whatever. There were more deep-rooted problems in that family, which needed to be worked on. That's putting it mildly. But Dr. Oziel requested that Erik sign waivers of the confidentiality agreement between patient and doctor so that the doctor could share what he learned with Jose and Kitty. Nope, that's not good. If a boy is being psychologically or physically interfered with by his father, as the defense is claiming, it is very unlikely that he would discuss it with a therapist if he knew that what he said was being passed on to his parents. And a person might also be reluctant to discuss it, at all, because they might just not want to talk about it with someone, especially an outsider. But even if he believed wholeheartedly in the confidentiality, he might just keep it to himself anyway. So, but that would really, I would think making him sign the waiver, what's the point? Like, now you have no confidentiality and you can't trust anything that he would say to the therapist, and he wouldn't be able to trust the therapist at all. What's the point? Crazy. Okay, many doctors would not have agreed to such a suggestion, but Jose was obviously the kind of man who would have kept on going until he found one who would. Well, sure, but that doesn't mean that you don't say no. In any case, Oziel agreed. Before Oziel took the stand, Leslie Abramson announced in a majestic voice to the court, oh, like mine, just kidding, that she intended to discredit him in any area known to man and God. And she has gone far in doing that. Very few people sitting in the courtroom have ever witnessed more flagrant distortions that they have heard here. One night after court, I sat in my room at the Chateau Marmont and watched on television what I had seen in court that day. Sitting with me was Judelon Smith, who seems to know everything there is to know about Oziel. Smith and another woman, Alex Corey, have filed a complaint against him, which resulted in a recommendation by the Attorney General of the state of California that his license to practice be revoked or suspended. The Attorney General's charge reads, this case involves the respondent, a psychologist who engaged in, hanky-panky, social and business relationships with two patients while he and the patients had a psychologist-patient relationship. In addition, the respondent disclosed professional confidences to one of the patients, furnished controlled substances without proper medical authorization or supervision to both patients, and forged the name of a physician in a letter. This would pretty much discredit any testimony that he would ever give in anything ever. I mean, if this guy said my last name is Oziel, I would have to triple check it, and then I would want to triple check it again. As Smith watched Oziel answer the lawyer's questions, she kept saying under her breath, a lie, a lie, a lie. Oziel had never admitted that Judelon Smith was in his office on either of the days the Menendez brothers confessed, whereas she has claimed from the day she went to the Beverly Hills police that she was listening on the other side of his office door. After that, Smith began saving messages Oziel left on her answering machine and taping his telephone calls to her. Ooh, was that legal? I don't know if California is a one-party consent state or two-party. I guess she would have gotten a pass from the cops anyway, but if she was passing the information on to them well, wait, she was working for the defense? And Oziel was working for the prosecution, so I guess that could have been dangerous if California is not a one-party state. And by that I mean in some states you are allowed to tape, for example, a telephone conversation without the knowledge or consent of the other party. In other states that is not legal, and you would have to let someone know that you were or intended to record them to give them the ability to refuse if they so chose. Okay, back to the article. The defense played a tape on which Oziel says to Smith, "You were there." When confronted by Michael Burt with the evidence that Smith had been in his office on November 2, Oziel replied, "I don't believe I testified under oath." This guy thinks that if he crosses his fingers and holds them behind his back, he can say whatever and it's totally fine. That about sums up Oziel, said Smith, watching the moment later on television. As a witness for the prosecution, Oziel presented himself well. Really, I was of the firm belief that Erik and Lyle were planning to meaning unalive, me. he said, to justify the long silence he maintained following the brother's confession to him, as opposed to just immediately going to the police, which he was allowed to do. He was not required to maintain confidentiality at that point. Movie of the week in the chat says, LOLOL, it totally cool to lie if it's not under oath, right? Let's see. Okay, where did I leave off? Boo, 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 boo. Okay, in describing that confession, he said that Erik was extremely agitated and depressed on the day he came to see him. He said he felt alienated over his parents' deaths. He felt as though he wanted to self-delete. He saw images of the scenes of his parents' deaths. He said he wanted to take a walk and tell the doctor something which he didn't want to tell him in the office. Now, why was he suspicious? Was it, as I said before, it was Dominick Dunne wrote in the first article, which I read on my stream yesterday, that the walls were so thin in Oziel's office that you could hear what was being said from one room to the next. And so Erik must have realized this, and perhaps that was what prompted him to not want to speak in the office, that he would have either known or suspected that someone else was or could have been in the office to overhear him. And according to the first article, Oziel had brought Smith, the mistress, to his office and said, I want you to sit here and eavesdrop. And in case anything gets, heated, I want you to be able to step in and do something. I don't know what he thought this lady would do against a man who he believed had unalived his parents with his brother using a shotgun, but okay, she was supposed to stop this, athletic young man from possibly attacking Oziel in a fit of rage. I don't know what she would have done, but the way it was mentioned in the first article, I got the impression that Erik would have seen Smith in the, maybe I misread it or maybe I'm misremembering, but it seemed as though he would have known that there was another person in the waiting room, and I believe it was stated that the Menendez brothers did not know who Judelon Smith was, so he would not have recognized her by sight. That she knew who they were, obviously from Oziel, but that they didn't know her. So anyway, that may have been why he said, hey, let's leave. If that is actually what happened, and who do you believe? What can you actually trust of what's being said here? So they go for the walk. Okay, they sat on a bench in a Beverly Hills park. Erik told him that Jose was a great man and that he wanted to write a book about him. Then they headed back to the office. Why would you have to leave the office to say my dad was great and I want to write a biography of him? That's not a secret, and certainly not something. What, he didn't want someone to get the jump on writing the book about his dad before him? Come on. Before entering the front door of the building, Erik leaned against a parking meter and said, "We did it." Back inside, Erik described in pretty elaborate detail what had happened. Wait, so why did he go back and then spill all the details in the office with the thin walls? This doesn't make any sense. Why did they need to go on the walk in the first place? Okay, Oziel said that Erik told him the plan began when he saw a BBC program on television in which a person K'd his father. He called Lyle into the room and told him to watch. He said that his father had been tyrannical, dominating, and controlling, with standards he couldn't possibly meet, and that he was very damaging to their mother also. Well, but how concerned are you about the mom? Because you're taking her out too. He said the reason the mother was K'd, oh, okay, you're going to tell me, was that they couldn't figure out a way of K'ing the father without K'ing her. She would have been a witness. Well, you could do it when she's not there. She couldn't have lived without the father. Well, maybe she could have. You could give her a chance if you really loved her and cared about her. She was unhappy. Well, yeah, and now she's nothing. These are dumb answers. These are dumb reasons. They make no sense. Erik felt the need to commit the M's quickly because he felt he would lose the emotional state he was in. But it was his idea? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, honestly, just like an outside read, not knowing much or anything about the Menendezes, not that much, it seems like if anyone came up with this, it would have been Lyle. But Erik's the one that wrote the screenplay, so I don't know. Erik's the one that seemed more emotional and more upset about it from what little I know about this. Lyle seemed like he was more in control of himself. So it seems less likely that the more emotional and weak person would be the, like, ringleader, but I don't know. Who knows? I wasn't there. Okay, Lyle wanted to wait and plan things out more. Erik told about buying the shotguns. He told about the stolen ID. He said he entered the room first and surprised the parents. He was shooting at the father. Lyle followed. Oh, I thought supposedly Lyle went first and Erik went second. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. Okay. Lyle followed and finished off the job. Oziel said he was confused about who shot which parent. Both brothers fired the shotguns. Erik said his father said something like, "No, no, no." He turned away and was shot as he said that. The mother was shot and fell to the floor. Then the father died, but the mother wasn't dead yet. The boys went outside and got more cartridges and reloaded the shotguns. I hope I can say this. Their mother, I mean, I can say it, but is YouTube going to have a problem? Their mother was moaning and trying to crawl. Lyle finished her off. Leslie Abramson was true to her promise of discrediting Oziel. Come on, Oziel discredits himself. His own existence discredits himself. She has always loathed him. At a news conference I attended 3 years ago, she characterized him as a gossip, a liar, less than credible. Now she, for Erik, and then Michael Burt, for Kyle, conducted for Lyle. It's missed. Look at this. It says Kyle. No, Lyle. Now she, for Erik, and then Michael Burt, for Kyle, conducted a cross-examination guaranteed to wreck the psychologist's already nearly wrecked career. They made him out to be not only a liar, but also a philanderer and a cheat. They didn't make him out to be that. He was that. Judalon Smith was his mistress. They suggested that he had made the tapes for extortionist purposes. I can believe it. And had threatened their clients with them. They showed that he billed the Menendez brothers for an extraordinary number of hours. Although the word blackmail was never mentioned, it was certainly implied. I'd buy it. I'd believe it. But the examination of the doctor went on too long. Oziel was on the stand for 6 days. It became a trial within a trial. It was a diversionary tactic, taking attention away from what the case is all about: murder. Outside the courtroom, prosecutor Pamela Bozanich mocked the defense tactic as a cheap edition of Divorce Court. Oh boy, remember that TV show? Oh goodness. That's you're homesick from school. What's on TV? Divorce Court. What a trashy, trashy show. Movie of the week in the chat says, oof, blackmailed. Yeah. I still wonder, movie of the week, about that mention in the first article from yesterday's stream about how Oziel got 2 shotguns. Am I allowed? Hey, movie of the week, I don't know if you know or can find out. Is YouTube going to have massive issues with me for saying the words for the weapons or even the word SHOT? I feel so silly talking around this, spelling things out and say, I just want to read the article straight through, but I'm afraid YouTube's going to have a fit. Movie of the week in the chat. Divorce Court was the best right after cartoons. I don't think I was watching cartoons at the time I was watching Divorce Court, but I suppose if you're homesick from school, all bets are off. You can watch whatever you want as long as it makes you feel, well, not whatever you want, but cartoons are okay if they make you feel better when you're sick. Okay, but as I was saying in that the first article that I read on yesterday's stream, it mentioned that Oziel felt threatened by the Menendez brothers, or that they had actually threatened him and his family, and so he moved Judalon Smith into the marital home that he shared with his, I guess, supposedly estranged but still married to wife and their 2 daughters, meaning his daughters with his wife, and that he had a shotgun for, I guess, was it for himself and the wife, or was it for both of them? No, he gave one to each of the women, which is kind of interesting. Imagine, this sounds like a really bad, like, reality show. You have a wife, you have a mistress, you move them into one house in Beverly Hills, and you give each of them a long gun. And what happens next? Movie of the week says, oh, you were about 10 when you were watching cartoons and Divorce Court. Okay, all right, that sounds about right. And I think you're okay to mention guns and shooting. I hope so. I not trying to offend the community or violate guidelines or cause a problem. I'm just trying to say words. Okay, where do we leave off? Divorce Court. Divorce Court was such a trashy show. Wasn't it that they took supposedly transcripts of actual cases, and then they had actors act out the parts of the, like, it's not plaintiff defendant, it's like respondent co-respondent, I think, but they were real lawyers that were playing, or were they actors that played lawyers? I can't remember if they got real lawyers, but the lawyering was so bad, the acting was so bad. Maybe they were good lawyers who couldn't act as a lawyer in front of a camera, and the judge was a real judge, right? Because there was also a show called The Judge that was on at the same time. Was it not Movie of the Week? Maybe they were run back-to-back, Divorce Court and The Judge, which I seem to recall started with like an elderly man, a sort of Judge Wapner-esque, if anyone remembers the old People's Court TV show. And it was like the guy getting ready for work, saying bye to his wife, and I seem to remember shutting a car door or a car trunk, and he puts on his robe. Anyway, I'm going far too off into nonsense here, but I'll get back to the article. The Menendez brothers were nearly forgotten, just as in my conversation just now. Although at times, Lyle shook his head in disbelief at what the therapist was saying, and several times Erik turned around to his Aunt Marta and shook his head. Watching them, I wondered if these were planned moves to get a reaction from the juries. Possibly. Movie of the Week in the chat says, The Judge was drama. Divorce Court was a fake, quote, real, unquote, trial. i.e. unscripted. Oh, okay. Huh, all right. I did not know that. Back to the article. Marta Cano grinned broadly at the discomfort of Dr. Oziel throughout Abramson's cross-examination, as if she were watching a sitcom instead of her nephew's trial for the murder of her brother, an alleged child interferer and sister-in-law. At one point, she was reprimanded by Judge Weisberg, who had allowed her to sit in the courtroom, even though she was to be a witness for the defense. It's always weird in these incredibly serious trials. I've watched some online, and to see people laughing in a courtroom when it's like an M trial, a person has been unalived trial, and inevitably they spent hours and hours and days and weeks in these courtrooms, and inevitably things happen, like something happens, someone makes a mistake, or just normal life happens, and people laugh, and the judge is laughing, the prosecutor, the defense, the family members of the victims who are seated in the courtroom might even laugh, the defendant might even laugh, and there are times when I as a spectator just think like, that's creepy, don't laugh, but as a human being, obviously, I totally understand, but it does read as like weird to me. But, you're a human being. It's going to happen, I guess. Back to the article. Abramson is famous for being able to break down witnesses, make them cry, contradict themselves, lose their temper, and scream at her. Although Dr. Oziel contradicted himself many times, he did not break down. He remained cool, assertive, in control of himself. Instead, it was Leslie Abramson who became intensely angry and screamed. She had to call for a brief recess to calm down. She timed herself out like a toddler. Wow, I didn't realize you could do that in court. For his part, Michael Burt conducted the cross-examination in a quiet but lethal manner, in total contrast to Leslie Abramson's histrionics. When Oziel finally left the stand, there was a general sense of, let's get back to what we're here for. Oziel's time will come in another court for another case. What does that mean? I mean, he had his own case, I guess. He got in trouble for doing that stuff with his girlfriend / his mistresses / patients, and he had his license taken away, as we learned earlier in this stream. Okay, we've got another gossipy italics section. My favorite sections in this article. Former studio head and producer Robert Evans, oh boy, was a piece of work, who cannot stay out of trouble, is having a triple whammy this summer. Fresh on the heels of his highly publicized comeback film, Sliver, which bombed miserably. Sliver was Sharon Stone, Billy Baldwin, correct? I think so. His name has surfaced in the press, along with that of his co-producer Bill McDonald, the maybe not fiancé of Sharon Stone. Okay, there you go. In a lawsuit linking Evans and McDonald to an alleged scheme to defraud private investors of $6 million. Evans and McDonald have both denied any wrongdoing, but Evans's name has also been regularly linked to the Heidi Fleiss scandal, although he is not connected with the studio that has allegedly charged, I hope I can say this word, hooker and drug costs to its development fund. I think I know I think I remember what studio that was. And of course Robert Evans uses all of them, all of the madams. Well, he's dead now, so I suppose he's not using them anymore. But yes, I imagine that all of Hollywood's madams and misters and whatnot were probably pretty familiar with Robert Evans. He is an absolute piece of work, and I don't know if he's entirely worthy of doing a stream on him, but he definitely comes up in connection with a lot of scandalous stuff, so he'll probably show up on a future stream, or probably more than one future stream. Okay, back to the article. On the day before the boys cade their parents, I keep saying the boys, and they're now, both in their 20s? I think the brothers would be sufficient, but the boys. The Menendez family went on a shark fishing expedition on a chartered boat called Motion Picture Marine. The captain of the boat testified that there was not much interaction going on between the parents and sons. The boys stayed together in the front of the boat, far away from their parents, even though they got soaked and cold. Leslie Abramson claimed to the media during a lunch break, and her remarks appeared on the local evening news, that the boys, there it is again, were afraid to go on the boat because they thought their parents were going to K them. Their parents were going to throw them into shark-infested waters in front of the charter boat captain. Okay. To me, it seems highly unlikely that a smart man like Jose Menendez would plan to K his sons on a fishing trip of this sort in the presence of the captain, the captain's girlfriend, and a deckhand. A more compelling explanation for the non-communication was the fact that the boys, there it is again, the boys, he's going with the branding. Even though he doesn't seem like the best friend of Leslie Abramson, Dominick Dunne has decided to adopt Leslie's branding of them as the boys. It's interesting. Okay, the boys. Where do we go? Sorry, I lost my place. Okay, that the boys, their plans drawn up, had gone to San Diego the day before to buy the guns for the massacre they were to commit the next day, which was Sunday, the maid's day off. Okay, obviously I'm behind on the story because this is 1993 and I don't have my answer, and it is currently 2024 as I am reading this. But I don't know, and I am going to find out. The shotguns. Receipts. Were there receipts? Did they pay cash? Did they use cards? Well, if a fake ID was used to purchase the guns, I assume it was not put on a card unless it was put on a card with the same name as the ID. If not, I mean, is there a receipt? Is there any security camera footage from the store? Because the guns are missing. So the idea that they did buy the guns, where did this come from other than Oziel, I guess? Oziel put this forth? Did the brothers themselves claim that they did this? Is there any proof? Any proof, I don't know, mileage on their cars, anything, that they were absent? No one saw them, or maybe it was just the one brother that did the purchasing? Really? I don't know. Maybe there's an answer to this. I just don't have it. It seems weird. Okay, so italics again. Tina Sinatra, the daughter of Frank Sinatra, took out a restraining order on her former lover, the actor James Farentino, last spring, after what had been described as a turbulent and violent relationship came to an end. She claims now that Farentino continues to stalk her and makes her life miserable. Hard Copy, oh, that was a great show, has had a field day with the story. Tina's girlfriends have additional stories to tell. She wants him to be kept away from her. He has been charged with violating the restraining order. A court case is upcoming. I would think Tina Sinatra would have the kind of contacts that would be able to keep a guy away from her, if you know what I mean. The Jose Menendez may not have had actual mob connections, but Frank Sinatra definitely did, and I would assume that Tina would be able to call in a favor from one of Daddy's friends and get a message sent to old James Farentino. But wow, gossip from people who even in 1993 were not hot topics of gossip, to be honest. I'm sort of shocked that he's saying that Hard Copy was running with this like this was a hot story. Tina Sinatra was how many years off of These Boots Were Made for Walking at the point that she was breaking up with James Farentino, who, gosh, I remember his name and I couldn't tell you at all what he was in, or even if he's still alive. I should look that up maybe, but that was, as I said, a very long time ago, and these people weren't even that cool at the time. No, Farentino has been dead since 2012. Movie of the Week in the chat says, there would have to be a receipt and a form filed with the ATF and a record of a transaction authorization from the ATF. Okay, Movie of the Week, was that a law at the time, though? Because obviously there's been more, I think, laws passed since 1990 that would have required more record keeping. I don't know what the requirements were at that time, but yeah, I would think that there would be some kind of record. Oh boy. Sorry, I was taking a little side break here while I was drinking some tea, and I looked up James Farentino on Wikipedia to find out that he had indeed died in 2012. But I noticed that he had, in the personal life section, he definitely had some trouble, and so he was charged with stalking Tina Sinatra in 1993, and she got the restraining order. But right below that, it says he was arrested in Canada in 1991 after customs intercept a package containing 3.2 grams of, something that would get him all fired up. Let's put it that way. That might have been part of why he was getting a little feisty with Tina Sinatra. Marching isn't the only thing that a powder can make you want to do when you're getting 3.2 grams of it sent to your hotel room in Canada. And don't do that. I mean, geez. If someone were going to take a chance doing that in the U.S., but in Canada, that's dopey. I'm guessing he was in Canada and he didn't know anyone locally. And so he decided to call something in. Oops. That didn't work. Movie of the week says even back in the 90s there would have to be records with the feds for the gun purchases. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that, movie of the week. You're always a big help. And we're closing in on the end of this article. So let's see. Back to the text. In a startling courtroom session on August 13, just before the prosecution rested and with the juries not present, Lester Kuriyama, the quiet but extremely effective co-prosecutor, solved the mystery of the BBC film that Oziel said Erik had told him inspired the Kayings. The assumption had always been that it was a British film that had played on public television. For almost a year, the police and prosecutors, working with the BBC and Scotland Yard, had tried to track down the film, to no avail. The previous weekend, Kuriyama and his wife had gone with their 6-year-old daughter to a video store where they selected The Addams Family to rent. As Kuriyama's wife reached for the film, she happened to notice on the shelf below a made-for-television film called Billionaire Boys Club, BBC. That was an interesting story, and they made a decent TV movie of it. If you might be able to find that on YouTube. If I remember correctly, it starred Judd Nelson, and it wasn't a bad adaptation. Was that? If I'm remembering correctly, I think so. The Kuriyamas took that film home as well, and that was based, he's going to tell you, it's based on a true story. The resemblances between the true crime story on the video and the Menendez slayings were uncanny. It soon became clear that the carefully thought out plot of the Menendez brothers was totally copycat and totally in keeping with the traditions of their cheat, lie, steal, but win family. Billionaire Boys Club had played in rerun on NBC 3 weeks before the brothers kayed their parents. The plot of that film revolves around a group of rich Beverly Hills boys who meaning unalive, 2 people, including the father of one of them. In the film, the central character talks about committing the perfect murder. Dr. Oziel had said that the boys also talked about having committed a perfect murder after having failed to perform to perfection in the Calabasas thefts. His father would have been proud of him, Lyle said, according to Oziel. In the film, one of the victims was shot in the back of the head. So was Jose Menendez. In the film, the alibi was that the killer was at the movies. The brothers claimed to have gone to see License to Kill, which was a bad choice. But because it was sold out, they had gone to see Batman again. The second victim in the film had political enemies. Erik suggested that Castro might have sent someone to kill his father, who was Cuban. Because the father in the film was worth $30 million, the boys decided to kill him. The boy in the film drove a Jeep. Erik bought a Jeep with the first payment he received from Jose's insurance policy. The boy in the film wore a Rolex watch. 4 days after the Menendez brothers shot their parents, they both bought Rolexes. Perhaps the greatest irony of all is that the Billionaire Boys Club video is being released by Live Entertainment. And that, of course, was the employer of Jose Menendez. And ironically, Live. He was unalived. Okay. Lester Kuriyama sought unsuccessfully to be allowed to show the film to the juries. Oh, that would be so prejudicial. Leslie Abramson fought like a tiger to keep the jury from seeing it. I would imagine that some of the jury would have already seen it. It was a popular, the story was well known. As I said, it was based on a true story. The true crime story itself was well publicized. And then I think the TV movie might have been based on a book, because I'm sure at least someone would have written a book about it. Oh, movie of the week in the chat says, OMG, WTH, were they trying to get caught? Do you mean by imitating the things from the Billionaire Boys Club? I don't know that it actually doesn't convince me. Buying a Rolex, like, that's so basic. It's like basic B, right? I'm going to buy a Rolex. Like, that's kind of a go-to. If you said, hey, name an expensive watch brand, I think Rolex might be the first one that might come to someone's mind. I mean, most people probably wouldn't just go to like, oh, Chopard, or, Patek Philippe or something like that. I think Rolex is kind of like obvious, rich person, like starter kit. You know what I mean? The same thing with the Porsche that Lyle bought, because the Alfa Romeo wasn't good enough for him. Jeep actually isn't that fancy. Isn't that, I don't know if they had Hummers in 1990 yet. But I would imagine something along those lines. Or, a Range Rover. A Range Rover seems to me would have been more of a luxurious car purchase than a Jeep. Jeep doesn't seem super aspirational, even though, I mean, I'm sure they're nice enough, but you know what I mean, right? You understand what I'm saying. But anyway, okay. Where did I leave off? Okay, Judge Weisberg, for all his sternness, is occasionally very funny. Are you going to sell popcorn? He asked Kuriyama. He nixed the showing of the film, but ruled that Kuriyama could tell the jurors that a movie had been aired on NBC on July 30 and 31, 1989, which involved a son who K's his father, and that the words of the title began with the letters BBC. Leslie Abramson said she had never seen the movie. That's well, it's possible. Yet several weeks earlier, when Craig Signorelli had said the words Billionaire Boys Club on the stand, she had jumped to her feet and shouted, "Your Honor, I would object. Move to strike and ask to approach." Judge Weisberg responded, "All right, the objection is sustained. The answer is stricken, and the jury's admonished to disregard it." Okay, now I want to know, in what context did Signorelli say Billionaire Boys Club? And why did the judge allow it to be stricken from the record? Why did he decide it would be stricken from the record? I kind of want to see the testimony now, or at least read the transcript. Okay, why are Movie of the Week in the chat says, Jeeps are expensive, and in LA they can be status things. For girls, anyway. Oh, nice sexism, Movie of the Week. Not to assume your own gender. Ha ha ha. But, I don't know. I just don't think of a Jeep as a LA Beverly Hills status symbol. Not a Jeep. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I don't mean it like that. I just mean, well, I mean, honestly, I don't think of a Porsche as that much of a status symbol in Beverly Hills, but maybe in 1990 that was still like a hot, I don't know. My level of snobbery is boundless. Not my personal snobbery, but my understanding of snobbery. So when I think of what's a really, really, really high-end car, I don't think Porsche. I certainly don't think Jeep. But that's me being a snob on other people's behalf. It's not my I don't care. I don't want a Porsche. If I had a choice, I might pick a Jeep. I might pick a Jeep over a Porsche. But they're both fine, I suppose, for their own purposes. Okay, back to the article. Where did I leave off? Okay, why are all these relations here in the courtroom supporting the boys? There it is again, the boys, not the brothers, not the young men, not the defendants, not the accused, the boys. It's like it should have trademark on it. Who killed their son or brother or sister. Several of them will take the stand for the defense. A reporter who met one of the aunts in the ladies' room told me she said, "When you know what the truth is, you will understand. Is there more we don't know? Is there a surprise yet to come from the ever-resourceful Leslie Abramson, who said to Alan Abrahamson of the Los Angeles Times after the prosecution rested, 'Now we start talking about what really happened.' Will she present the final confrontation of parents and sons in the family room in order to prove that the sons caved in self-defense? The former girlfriend of a prisoner who lived in the cell next to Erik's at the Los Angeles County Jail for 4.5 months told me that her boyfriend told her, 'He reminded me of a caged animal. He ran up and down the halls. Other times, he would be completely withdrawn or manic. He didn't say he hadn't done it or had. He only said, "We're going to prevail in court." For even one of the brothers to prevail, they may have to turn against each other in the defense case ahead. And isn't that perhaps why this trial has been set up from the beginning with 2 juries? I wonder. Well, we don't need to wonder because we already know what happened. They did not turn on one another, and to this day they have not turned on one another. So that tells you something about the brothers. They're at least locked in with one another. Whatever they did or didn't do, planned or didn't plan, said or didn't say, they're at least in lockstep with one another. And even if they do manage to get released from prison, it'll be interesting to see when they are no longer in that position of having to maintain, I guess, having to maintain or choosing to maintain a united front if they do indeed get released, which it looks like they might. Will they continue to maintain a united front? And will if they are released, if they do get freedom, albeit on probation, so a conditional freedom, there will be, I'm sure, offers, book offer. They can't, I guess, profit off of their crime, but if they are released based on the notion that it was a self-defense act because of abuse and, this horrible, horrible, horrible abuse by the parent, or both parents really, but primarily the father, would they be allowed to profit, in a sense, from maybe not the crimes, but would they be allowed to write books? Would they be allowed to sell their story, do interviews for money, lectures, podcasts, anything? I mean, they're celebrities. And in this culture, you can leverage that in huge, huge, huge ways, especially if you have a lot of people who believe that you are innocent. The West Memphis Three, Amanda Knox, I'm sure there are others. Those are just the ones I can think of off the top of my head. People who have been accused of crimes, in some cases convicted of crimes, then they say maybe they didn't do the crimes. There's a whole bunch of people who are firmly believe that they are guilty, a whole bunch of people who firmly believe they are not guilty, and yet they're walking around and they're able to leverage their celebrity and their fame and profit off of it. And in the case of the Menendez brothers, it's kind of interesting. They've already been convicted and sentenced. If they were to walk out, could they say whatever they wanted? Even if one of them, let's say, just for the sake of argument, one of them decides to turn on the other and say, it was all his idea. It was all him. And, he pressured me into, or whatever. They can't be retried. There's double jeopardy, right? So they wouldn't be able to be retried for anything if they admitted to anything that wasn't covered, in the case. If they, said, oh, we lied, if one of them came out and said, oh, I lied, or both of them did, about any aspect of the crimes, I guess they wouldn't be able to be charged with anything, or retried for the same crime, right? I guess they could be charged with other crimes related to it, but if there were, I don't think they would be charged with disappearing evidence for the guns going missing, even though that, tampering with a crime scene, that they're not going to be charged with that. I guess they're just going to if they get released, which it's a good chance, I suppose, that'll happen. It'll be interesting to see, do they fade into obscurity? Do they commit themselves to a private life? Or, I assume that they would try to leverage their fame in some way, but I guess it remains to be seen. Oh, Movie of the Week is saying, not sexism. You have no idea how many girls in LA drive Jeeps? Okay. Silly boys, Jeeps are for girls. Bumper. Oh, you have no idea how many silly boys, Jeeps are for girls bumper stickers I see. Okay, I had no idea that was a thing. And I have never seen that as a bumper sticker. So, okay, thank you for telling me, Movie of the Week. But anyway, we have come to the end of this article, which was what I wanted to cover. I'm going to scroll back up to the top. Here we are. This is what it looked like in the actual Vanity Fair magazine issue from October 1993. There's Dominick Dunne, the author, who is no longer with us, Leslie Abramson, the Menendez brothers, and I guess that's that other, I forget the name of the attorney they said had that Grace Kelly elegance or whatever. I assume that's her because of the blonde hair. But this was the second article in the Vanity Fair archive that Dominick Dunne wrote. You'll see his courtroom notebook. He was like the trial reporter for Vanity Fair, and I am going through one by one the articles that he wrote and were published in Vanity Fair. Yesterday's stream was on his first article, which was titled "Nightmare on Elm Drive." Sorry, I almost said Elm Street, like the movie, which obviously this is a play on. This was the article. I read that on yesterday's stream in its entirety. And then that was from 1990. Today's article was from 1993. And on the next stream that I do on the Menendezes, maybe tomorrow, is an article from March 1994. So that's about, 5-6 months after this article was written. And it is entitled Menendez Justice. So if you've been here and you've made it all the way to the end, thank you very much for tuning in. This is French Dip Empire. I am the Empress, and we are doing this. We don't have a regular schedule. Hopefully, I will be able to come up with one in the future. But if you want to know when we're going to go live, subscribe to the channel or bookmark the main YouTube page, because sometimes you might not get notifications. That happens. So bookmark it, subscribe, go ahead and like it. That helps people to find the channel. And in the future, I'm not true crime focused. I will be finishing Dominick Dunne's Menendez articles, and I will be doing other things, maybe in between my Menendez streams, my future Menendez streams. I'll be catching up on some news. As I said, I like to cover socialites and scandals, billionaires, royalty, and, the occasional Nepo baby news and nonsense. But anything that strikes my eye and is fun and that I know a little something about. So thank you for being here. I am wrapping up the stream, and I will see you next time.